Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Harry Potter. I didn't expect the Dark Lord to become my best friend. Chapter 61. Sir Prius stayed up a little while. It wasn't because of the homework, which didn't take him long. He just read for a while and boiled some medicine in the spare crucible in the dormitory before going to bed. He needs something to dispel the ambiguous factor in his mind. This is an area where you can't rely on books for help, and it's not easy to ask the people around you for help, so Serples is a little nervous, or timid, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. But in the final analysis, he pulled Tom to analyze. Tom didn't need to sleep anyway, so he pulled Tom to analyze, and the final conclusion should be that he didn't believe in love. Or maybe neither of them believed it. Is there really a kind of emotion that can make another life higher than oneself? Surprise and Tom thought hard, but still couldn't figure it out. Then don't think about it yet. Tom finally couldn't bear it anymore and urged Sepulus to go to bed. Maybe you will meet me as an adult again this year. Just go and ask him. Sepulus blinked. Seriously, you asked me to ask him? He has lived longer than me and must be more mature than me, Tom said calmly. Although I don't know what caused him to be mentally ill, there must be something good about him. That makes sense, Sir Prius nodded, then packed his things and went to sleep. He slept a little late, so when Surprise woke up the next day with a little dark circles under his eyes, Draco was quite surprised. What did you do last night? I didn't do anything. Sepulus couldn't tell Draco directly that he had received the flowers from Wolf. He was in a complicated mood and was curious about knowledge. He had a heart-to-heart talk with the ghost Tom in his dormitory, so he cleared his throat and began to talk casually. I woke up in the morning and looked at the class schedule, and saw that the first class was Gilderoy Lockhart's class, and my eyes darkened. There were dark circles under his eyes. Draco looked at Sepulus' determined face with a complicated mood. Yes. Sepulus nodded decisively. Draco saw that he really didn't want to say anything, so Draco shrugged. Okay, once your eyes are black, you have the final say. When they were sitting in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, and Draco was holding the outrageous and indescribable random test paper in his hand, he also blacked out. What the hell is this? Draco suppressed his frightened complaints. Sepris, next time something happens, can you please just stop talking? Lockhart was still wearing the turquoise clothes today, and he looked radiant. He leaned on the podium and picked up a book from the table of his classmates in the front row. It was Walking with Trolls, his own book. On the cover is a photo of himself winking. Looking at the two Lockharts, Sepulus felt a little headache. Lockhart said with a smile, pointing to the picture and blinking like the person in it, Gilderoy Lockhart. He seemed to be afraid that the students would not recognize him, so he started a lengthy self-introduction. Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin 3rd Class, honorary member of the Defense Against the Dark Arts, 5-time winner of Wizarding Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award, but I don't talk about that. I don't rely on a smile can drive away all the evil spirits. The corner of Sepulus's mouth twitched, and he felt his head hurt even more. I forgot, I should have asked Professor Snape to give me a note of leave last night. Serpulus pressed his temple. I can't imagine how he will be able to teach us in the future. Maybe it won't be particularly bad. Draco saw that Serpuls's expression was really bad, so he comforted him. Maybe he can learn some real skills, right? I already felt that this year was over since I read his complete set of works in the bookstore. Serpulus lowered his voice, but at that time I only thought that this year's professor might be a witch obsessed with Lockhart. I thought it was him who came to the class. Sepulus was genuinely feeling broken. These books were all novels and travel notes. He might still find them interesting as reading materials to spend his spare time, but to use them in class? No. I'm even afraid that he will come up with a questionnaire and ask us how we read the book. Serpulus pushed the book in his hand forward and sighed. A few minutes later, he and Lockhart in front of him stared at the test paper that had just been handed out. 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? 2. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? Outrageous questions like this, a total of 3 pages, 54 questions. Except for Draco's initial collapse, everyone laughed. Seriously, don't speak when you have a bad premonition in the future, okay? Serpulus, you are really a good person who is not good at what is bad. Sepulus banged his head on the table. What's wrong? Theodore heard the voice and turned around. raised his hand and rubbed Cypria's slightly red forehead, which he had knocked on the table. My fault. Sepals took a breath, his voice gnashing with hatred. I shouldn't have spoken. Half an hour later, Lockhart took away the roll. During this half hour, everyone was doing everything, chatting, sleeping, stealing snacks and playing around. Draco propped one arm on the table, then rested his face on his arm, watching Sepals write the paper. Do you remember? Draco asked. Remember, Sepals said bitterly, I was thinking about the merits of using this as a textbook. I gave up after reading it for the 5th time. I thought there was something wrong with the professor. He wrote quickly, because he was a little angry, and the mark left by his pen tip on the paper was not light. Draco laughed. You are so serious, Sepulus. I never thought that the first time I saw you angry was because you were taught by an too stupid professor. I caused you to be in the hospital wing last year. I've been lying here for half a month and you haven't gotten angry with me, and you haven't spoken in a harsh tone once. Sepulus blinked and turned to look at Draco. It's different, you didn't mean it. But Draco seemed determined to argue with him. Lockhart didn't mean to be stupid. The corners of Sepulus' lips curled up. How to explain this to Draco? Explain how much he longed to study and learn knowledge in the orphanage. Explain how he decided to rise up and find a way out with Tom in the future. It seems like I can't even say it. But both of these points, without exception, require him to allow himself to learn something truly useful. How could he not be angry that Lockhart had wasted so much of his time? But this couldn't be explained to Draco, so Sepulus suppressed the anger in his heart and changed the topic to Draco. You're not writing papers, what are you doing? Look at you, Draco said. Look at me. Sepulus was stunned for a moment, not knowing what Draco was talking about. Well, Draco actually nodded generously. I see you look good, let me count your eyelashes. Sepals felt that his face was getting a little hot for no reason. He looked away in a panic, and then silently focused all his attention on the roll of paper. Half an hour later, the papers were taken away, and Lockhart stood in front of the podium, reading them in front of the whole class. Tisk tisk, almost no one remembers that I like lilac the most. I mentioned it in A Year with the Tibetan Snowman. Some students want to read Wandering with the Werewolf carefully. I mentioned it in A Year with the Tibetan Snowman. It clearly states that my ideal birthday gift is for all magical and non-magical people to live in harmony, but I won't turn down a large bottle of Ogden's aged fire whiskey. He spoke plausibly in front of the stage, and Serpal's expression below him became even weirder. Did you answer? Draco diverted his attention to Lockhart, who was mumbling something in front of the stage. I got the answer. Sepulus pressed his head. I might as well not have been able to answer. He suddenly paused and glanced sideways at Draco. Did you write that paper? Oh, I wrote it. He asked if anyone remembered his favorite color, so I wrote, who cares what color you like? He asked if anyone remembered the birthday gift he wanted most, and I wrote, who cares? No one will give it to you. Draco said calmly and confidently. Serpulus exclaimed, wow, and said, you are very brave. Aren't you afraid that he will cause trouble for you later? Draco smiled, a little proudly. I didn't write down the name at all. Who is he going to trouble? Sepals nodded, feeling a little emotional. I learned it. Lockhart on the stage was still talking about useless things, but suddenly his tone changed. But Miss Hermione Granger remembered that my secret ambition was to rid the world of evil, and Mr. Cypress Grindelwald also remembered that I wanted to sell my own line of shampoo. Hart held 2 rolls of paper in his hand and waved. Actually, both of you are 100%. He seemed genuinely happy. Where are you two? Hermione raised a hand, and Serpals followed suit with a dark face. This is the first time I feel ashamed for getting high marks. Serpalus gritted his teeth and said, you should have reminded me, Draco, that I should just stop writing that crappy paper. Draco snickered on the side, his smiling eyebrows arched. No. Lockhart added 10 points to Hermione and Cyprius. It's even more shameful. Sepulus' eyes became hollow. Because I know him well enough, he gave me extra points. That's enough. Draco smiled even wider. So when Lockhart released a bunch of Cornish elves and asked everyone to catch them and put them back in cages, Serpals was a little bit harsh. Those Cornish elves who fell into Serpals' hands, the county elf suffered a certain degree of damage. I suddenly wonder if I should make a heartfelt apology for laughing so wildly just now. Draco said as he watched Serpils burn a Cornish elf to ashes with a fire spell, and then a gust of wind blew from the front of the wand, making the dust disappear completely. His Adam's apple rolled up. You wouldn't be angry with me that day, and then you would light me up too. Sepulus glanced at Draco. There's no need to worry about that. I'm still worried, Draco said seriously, but he's really handsome, really. Sepulus responded vaguely, his ears turning slightly red again. After returning to Hogwarts, daily exercise no longer consisted of climbing up and down the stairs in Ermengarde. After dinner, Sir Prius walked around the atrium of the castle a few times, and suddenly saw Ginny Weasley. The little girl was sitting under a pavilion, with no one around, looking around at something. Don't go there, Natasha suddenly reached for Serpilus's ear, she has a bad feeling about her. Sepulus was stunned for a moment. He was walking straight forward and then turned around a statue. What? I can't tell you what it feels like. Natasha placed her head next to Serpilus's ear, her cold body giving Serpilus a slight itch. If I insist on saying it, I might have nothing to do with that professor named Quirrell. The feeling on my body is similar, but not the same. Sepulus couldn't help but speed up his steps, same as Quirrell. Are you sure? No, the problem with Quirrell is because Quirrell is possessed by Riddle. Could it be that Ginny is also possessed by Riddle? I'm not sure. Natasha flicked her tail irritably. I don't feel good anyway, so you'd better stay away from her. I know. Sepulus nodded to express his understanding. It's not like you don't know that I care about my life very much. I just need to stay away from her. But Sepulus wanted to stay away from Ginny, but Ginny didn't do as Sepulus wanted. In the next period of time, Sepulus could always see Ginny Weasley in various places. He can always appear next to Sepulus, although he is not close, but because of Natasha's warning, Sepulus always feels uneasy when he sees Ginny Weasley. Especially when Ginny Weasley appeared too many times, people around Sir Prius also noticed. It was Astoria Greengrass who made the point. Although the little girl received a lot of indifference from Draco, she was very good at saving the country and appeared next to Daphne under the banner of various sisterly affections. Daphne couldn't really push her sister away, so in the end, although Astoria didn't completely squeeze into their circle, she still got a position similar to that of an observer. One day during dinner, she seemed to say unintentionally, that girl from the Weasley family seems to like Sepulus very much. The light words attracted most people's attention, and Draco's brows frowned visibly. What? She and I are both in first grade, but I think she will always appear next to Serpils, Astoria said obediently, holding the small cake in front of her. She also has a relationship with Slytherin. Students have asked about Serpils. Blaise touched his chin and thought for a moment. It's true, I did see the little girl from the Weasley family several times. I thought it was an illusion. It turned out that she came for Sepulus. It's nothing. Sepulus frowned slightly. It's just a coincidence. But you said you stayed at the Weasleys for a few days. Theodore's voice joined the conversation lightly. Sir Prius looked sideways at him, always feeling that Theodore's voice seemed a bit cool. It's really an illusion. Serpilus felt that he needed to explain his innocence a few more words. My sister and I have only met a few times. It must be an illusion. Draco just snorted coldly, looking at the back of Ginny Weasley sitting at the Gryffindor table. It's best. Draco was a little unhappy, and Theodore seemed a little unhappy, but Theodore's unhappiness was not obvious, and Sepulus was a little confused, not knowing where their unhappiness came from. What is going on? Sepulus was a little confused. Are they both in love with Ginny Weasley? But it shouldn't be possible, neither of them have a very high opinion of the Weasley family. Sepulus was confused, but Sepulus didn't say anything. Then he was detained by Draco over the weekend. You have to go watch my Quidditch training. Draco knocked on the door of Serpil's dormitory. This is my first training. Sir Prius opened the door, and before he could say anything, Draco had already entered the room without anyone noticing. Isn't this right? Doesn't it mean that Slytherins pay great attention to the privacy of their colleagues? Why are you so familiar with me, Draco? However, Serpils believed that there was nothing in his room that Draco could not see, so he let him go. The room is a little messy, Serpilus said, feeling a little guilty. I was studying the potion ratio recently. Professor Snape asked me to study it myself first, and I didn't want to fry the pot and go back and forth in the dormitory. Just doing an experiment. His official pot of love potion is still simmering in Professor Snape's office, but he also has a row of pots at the same pace in his dormitory. He conducts experiments on himself every day, and then mixes the pots that he thinks are the most perfect. Reproduction in Professor Snape's office. He was too timid to explode the cauldron in Professor Snape's office. He felt that if his pot did blow up in Professor Snape's office, he might have to blow it up in Professor Snape's office too. He cherishes his life and doesn't want to die. And as I said, it's fun to try new methods of boiling medicine every day. I should go to Durmstrang on the weekend. Sir Prius waved his wand and cleared a sofa for Draco to sit on. When are you training on the weekend? Saturday afternoon. Draco snuggled into the sofa comfortably. It's just a day for you. You can go to Durmstrang to stay with Wolf all the time on weekends. Why don't you stay with me occasionally? Sir Prius wanted to say that was not the case, but in the end he nodded. Okay, then I'll tell Wolf in advance that I won't go this Saturday. Draco nodded with satisfaction. Well, it's not a big deal if you don't go there once in a while, but I'm more important in your heart. Who gave you the flowers? Draco sat upright on the sofa in an instant, then stood up and ran to Serple's bedside table before Serples could react. There was the bouquet of blue roses given to him by Wolf. He didn't know what kind of magic had been cast there. After putting them there for a long time, the roses were still as delicate as ever, and they were the same as the fresh ones Sepulus picked from Godric's Hollow just now. Roses probably don't have much to offer. Because he felt that the vase he transformed with the transformation spell was not beautiful enough, Sepulus specially ordered a new vase for the rose to use as its new home. Couldn't I have bought it myself? Serples didn't expect Draco to have such a big reaction. Looking at the roses in his hand, he looked a bit angry and bitter. Why such a big reaction? Draco's face turned slightly red. It didn't look like he was shy or anything. He seemed angry, but his tone was not as excited as before. You don't look like you can buy yourself flowers. If you buy flowers, 80% of the time you should be prepared to grind them into powder and throw them into your crucible. Sepulus said, ah, and nodded. Indeed. So who gave this to you? Draco's eyes moved away from the bouquet of roses and fell on Serple's face. Not. Sir Prius was stunned. Did Theodore offend you? Why did he suddenly call Not? It wasn't him, it was Bull who sent it. The German Wolf. Draco's expression changed again. You don't understand. Forget it, it's okay. Sir Prius was obviously confused. Is there anything I need to know? No, Draco replied decisively. You can just go and watch me train on Saturday. Sepulus nodded in understanding. Draco seemed a little angry when he left, leaving Sepulus confused. Sir Prius went to tell Wolf about his inability to come over on Saturday. As he expected, Wolf did not stop or refute. He just nodded, then took out the suit from the cabinet and packed it in a dust bag. The clothes were handed to Serples. The court will be drying out. Wolf handed the clothes to Sir Prius. I ordered them before. I thought you could use them when you went to watch me play Quidditch. Sir Prius pinched the dust bag and said, you also play Quidditch? Yeah, Wolf nodded. Hitter. Sir Prius looked at Wolf's well-defined muscle lines, and then at Wolf's slender and tall figure, and felt that the batter really suited him, and he looked so powerful. Then when will you train or have a game next? Sir Prius said very short-handedly, I'll come and see. It still depends on your time. Wolf did not give a clear time. The class schedule at Hogwarts is different from Durmstrang's. It depends on your convenience. Sepulus said, oh, and wrote his own class schedule to Wolf. This is my class schedule. I actually have quite a lot of free time. You can see when you are free and I am free. Just call me over. Wolf nodded and pressed the paper under the glass of his desk. Okay. The weather was very good on Saturday, and since there was no need to go to Durmstrang, and Draco's training was in the afternoon, Sepulus rarely allowed himself to have a sweet sleep that allowed him to wake up naturally. He left the dormitory just before lunch. Draco was already sitting in the common room, looking quite proud. He leaned back in the armchair with his chin raised, which made Sepulus feel as if he was what animal? After thinking for a moment, I felt that I knew it. It might be a peacock spreading its tail. Are you awake? Draco waved to Serples. It's rare to see you come downstairs at this time. A lot of luxury. Sir Prius smiled and sat down on another sofa. I just woke up after a late sleep today. you look very handsome today, Draco. Draco was wearing the uniform of the Slytherin Quidditch student team. He was naturally good-looking, and could be said to look good in anything he wore. But when he suddenly changed his style, he looked different from usual, and even more eye-catching. Really, Draco snorted a little proudly, I'll be more handsome in a while. Sleeping in made one feel tired, and Serples finished his lunch lazily and in an erratic state, and then followed Draco to the Quidditch pitch. Aren't you going, Pansy? Thupples paused and greeted Pansy. Although Draco didn't seem to like Pansy, Pansy seemed to like Draco. Serples thought silently that he didn't like that little girl from Astoria very much, so he still tried to match Pansy up. All right. Pansy looked at Serples' sincere face and suddenly smiled, very gently. Thank you, Serples, I have something else to do today, so I won't go. Surprius nodded regretfully, and then followed Draco out of the Slytherin lounge. Seeing them leaving, Daphne came over and sat down next to Pansy. Hey, you really don't want to go? My sister did. Seprus invited me to go with good intentions, Pansy said with a smile that never faded, but if I go, Draco will be unhappy, right? The Malfoys are indeed a very good family. I do like Draco as my marriage partner, but that doesn't mean I have to be a Malfoy. She was gentle and calm, elegant and confident. Daphne nodded in approval, then smiled and looked at Theodore. Okay, then Pansy has a reason not to go. Why don't you go, Theodore? I'm not good at Quidditch. Theodore turned over the pages of the book in his hand without raising his head. It's just a foil for Draco, there's no need. Daphne clicked her tongue twice at this. Wow, you group of scheming men, Sepulus is so pitiful. Each one depends on his or her ability. Theodore remained calm, it will take a long time. And poor Sepulus didn't know that the above conversation happened after he left the lounge. He just followed Draco and walked on the lawn to the Quidditch pitch, blowing the warm wind from a distance. Seeing that the bandages on the Whomping Willow were taken off, and some new branches seemed to be growing out, I felt very comfortable. Maybe I should consider getting a dog, Sepulus said sincerely. It doesn't need to be a very expensive breed. He just needs to have a healthy body, strong limbs, bright eyes, and be able to run happily on the lawn. Very good. Draco tilted his head and glanced at Serples. Natasha might be jealous. Natasha is family, Serples corrected Draco. If you have a dog, the dog is a pet. I feel sad in my heart for the pet dog you may have in the future. Draco shrugged and smiled. What kind of dog do you like? I haven't thought about it, Sepulus said calmly, it's just that this lawn is so good. I feel sorry for it, because it looks really good for running. If I run alone, it may attract unnecessary trouble. Concern, but if I run with my dog, it seems a lot more reasonable. Draco said, wow, and nodded. When they arrived at the Quidditch pitch, they saw a group of people waiting on the side from a distance. They were all wearing Slytherin Quidditch uniforms and said hello to Draco. I'm going over first. Draco raised his hand and hit Sepulus on the shoulder. I'll wait in the stands. Surprius raised his hand and pointed to the Slytherin stands, and then saw an obvious light blonde head on it. I'll go to the Hufflepuff stands. Who is that? Draco frowned. Maybe it's Astoria, Surprius shrugged. I'm not familiar with her, so I don't want to sit with her, and I can't help but be polite when we meet. Draco said, yeah, in understanding, as long as you don't go to the Gryffindor stand, it's fine. Surprius waved his hand to show that he understood. Of course he wouldn't go to the Gryffindor stand, he wasn't stupid. But when he subconsciously raised his head to look at the Gryffindor stands, he found that there were also people in the Gryffindor stands. He, Hermione, Ron, and for some reason Ginny was also here and stared with wide eyes. He glanced. Finally, Sepulus hesitantly raised a hand and waved, as a greeting. Hermione responded to Serples' greeting. She seemed to shout something from a long distance away, but the distance was too far and Serples couldn't hear clearly. Then the girl turned towards the stairs, actually intending to come down to talk. Surprius hesitated for a moment, stopped, and waited patiently for Hermione to come over. Why are you here, Serples? Long time no see. Hermione was slightly out of breath as she hurried down the stairs. Are you here to see Harry? No, Serpulus was confused by Hermione's question. I came to see Draco. He said he had training today. What? Hermione looked a little surprised, but Harry said that Senior would book the show today. Sepulus was stunned for a moment and shook his head to express that he didn't know what was going on. Oh my God. Hermione covered her face. We just thought Harry had a fan from Slytherin and was comforting Ginny. Comfort Ginny. Serpils noticed the key point in his words, Ginny to Harry. Hermione's face turned a little red, but she didn't deny it. Serpils said that was great. Ginny liked Harry, and he would have something to explain next time whoever made trouble with Ginny. But after a pause, he felt that it couldn't be done. Ginny still has a crush. Hermione nodded doubtfully but confidently. The little bubble of hope burst. If Ginny still had a crush on her, Serpils couldn't use this as a reason to explain. There was no need for a girl's heart to be revealed in this way. So Sepulus sighed with regret in his heart. Hermione. Suddenly Ron shouted from far away in the stands, over there. His voice is indeed louder. Hermione and Sir Prius both turned to look in the direction Ron was pointing, and saw the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams standing together, surrounded by many people, and it seemed like some kind of quarrel had broken out. I'll go over and have a look. Serpils was a little worried about Draco. After all, Draco joined the Quidditch team in the second year and was the youngest in the Slytherin team. The team leader Flinty was a muscular man, his arms were probably thicker than Draco's thighs. He was afraid that Draco would suffer. I'll go too, Hermione said hastily, and followed Sepils in the direction. It wasn't too far, but when they got there they could be heard already arguing. What's going on? Serpils squeezed into the crowd and stood next to Draco. Oh, it's okay, Flint is introducing them to the equipment my father changed for the Slytherin team. Draco patted Sepulus on the shoulder reassuringly, and then showed Sepulus the equipment in his hand. Broom, Nimbus 2001, this year's new model, is much faster than last year's 2000 series. Sepulus looked at the brand new one, smooth and shiny. No wonder there was a quarrel. Sir Pris's mood was slightly complicated. You are full of sarcasm. While others still don't understand the style. Very good, isn't it? Draco continued to mock. But maybe Gryffindor can also get some money to buy a few new brooms, right? Speaking of which, your head of house is quite partial. Yes, she is willing to buy the Nimbus series for the Golden Boy Potter, but she is not willing to spend the money to replace your Sweep series. Quote. The Slytherin students were all laughing, and the Gryffindor players didn't look very good. At least no one on the Gryffindor team has to pay to join the team. A voice that became shrill with anger sounded. It was Ginny Weasley who ran over at some point. Harry got into the academy team based on his real ability, unlike you. Draco's face fell. His eyes fell on Ginny's face, and he didn't know what he was thinking. I really don't understand why Sepils would be willing to be friends with you. Ginny was still angry. A guy like you who only cares about money shouldn't have friends. As soon as these words came out, not to mention Draco's expression, Sepulus's mind buzzed, and he finished thinking, why are you so similar to Harry's speech back then? Sure enough, Sepulus heard Draco sneer arrogantly, really? Then what are you, huh? He raised his chin with a cold expression. Mind yourself, Weasley, and don't rush to get close to Sepulus. Why is the air around him sweeter? Or do you plan to lean against Sepulus? Les has achieved your class leap, huh? Draco's tone was really sarcastic and mean. Ginny was blinded by what he said, and then her face turned pale and she staggered back 2 steps. I didn't. Draco just sneered in response. The atmosphere was very awkward for a moment. Flint coughed and was about to give up. However, out of the corner of his eye, Serpils caught sight of Ron Weasley's face, which was red with anger. He looked towards Draco, raised his wand. Armor protection. Sepils raised the wand before Ron. The lights of 2 magic spells flashed almost at the same time, but when the light went out, only Ron was hit by the magic spell, staggered back 2 steps and fell to the ground. After a few seconds of pause, Ron burped and spit out several slugs. I didn't do anything. Sepulus immediately raised his wand and performed a magic retracement to prove his innocence. I only have an armor to protect me. Everyone's expressions were a little complicated for a moment, and finally the Weasley twins cleared their throats. Well, it's Ron's fault for using magic, and Ginny's fault for speaking too recklessly, but Malfoy's choice of words is indeed a bit excessive. Quote. She went first, Draco snorted, looking at Ron who was being supported by Hermione and Harry and kept spitting out slugs. It's even. The Weasley twins didn't have any more objections to this. George came over generously and patted Surprius on the shoulder, inviting him to visit the burrow when he had time. Sepulus nodded to this and told George that you should be polite and go see your sister. Fred was calm and waved his hand. It's a small matter, the Weasley family are all very nervous. Following these words, Sepulus turned his head and glanced at Ginny, but this glance gave him a chill in his back. That's not Ginny. In other words, that was not the look Ginny should have. She stood behind the crowd with her head lowered. She seemed to have fallen into a certain degree of depression because of what Draco had just said, but through her red bangs, Sepulus saw a pair of condescending, scrutinizing but playful eyes. In just a moment, that look disappeared again, replaced by a slightly pitiful look that was about to cry. But the chill behind Surprius is still there, and it's not a lie. Is Riddle really possessing Ginny? Surprius looked away. Just pretend to be stupid and pretend that I don't know anything and the trouble won't be found on me. He continued to watch Draco's training in the stands with a little bit of uneasiness. It wasn't until the sun in the sky turned red and dyed the surrounding clouds in the evening that he and Draco returned to the Slytherin lounge. Are you going to your godfather's to make some medicine tonight? Draco was deeply impressed by the pile of cauldrons in Surprius' dormitory. Well, it's almost over. Everything seems to be fine so far. Maybe it will be ready in the next few days. Speaking of the potion boiling on his shelf, Surprius became more energetic. It's already here. The color of Mother of Pearl is better, but it's still not that good. I think it may be because I didn't use frozen fire ash snake eggs at the beginning, and there was a slight problem with the temperature control, which caused the steam to not be right. Draco was stunned at this. You are serious? Love potions are very expensive outside, Surprius answered seriously. Although there are sales restrictions, many stores will mix a small amount of love potion into chocolate for Valentine's Day specials. If this pot is if the effect is good, I can sell this directly. Draco's expression looked a little more complicated. Are you short of money? Oh, there's no shortage of it. Surprius didn't think there was anything wrong with his words, but my initial goal may be a bit big, so it's better to be diligent and frugal. What is your goal? Draco asked curiously. By Diagon Alley. Surprius said calmly. Sure enough, Draco didn't take Surprius' words seriously. He just thought that Surprius was making a joke and laughed. Then he bumped Sepulus's shoulder. Then you will have to fight for a long time. Diagon Alley is not cheap. Yes, Diagon Alley is not cheap. Surprius felt a little bitter. I'm not kidding, I really want to buy it. He sighed inwardly again. When he went to Professor Snape's place to brew the potion at night, he paid special attention to it. He was relieved when he saw that small cyclones began to condense on the top of his cauldron. Don't be nervous, Professor Snape actually said to comfort him. Maybe he was a little nervous. The gloss is very good, and it will be ready in 3 days. Surprius responded with a cute smile and an open-minded and studious attitude. Although it was a bit showy or overly narcissistic, he was indeed very likable. He left Professor Snape's office, but was very surprised to see Draco at the door. Why are you here? There was some confusion in Sepulus's eyes. Do you have anything to do with Professor Snape? He asked sincerely, and was worried that Draco would miss curfew if he came to see Professor Snape at this time. Draco looked at his serious and worried face and sighed for no reason. I'm not here to find Godfather. Draco looked at Surprius. I'm here to pick you up and take you back to the lounge. Surprius blinked at the corner of his eyes, looking quite sincerely confused. Take him back. It's not like he can't go back on his own. But looking at Draco's expression, Sepulus decided to keep this confusion in his heart and not ask. The walk back was quiet. Curfew was approaching at this time, and there were no students hanging around outside. The corridors were empty, and it was so quiet that you could hear people's heartbeats. My heartbeat seems to be a little fast. Draco too. But suddenly, a very discordant voice joined in. Come, fresh blood and life. Let Sepulus be in a trance for a moment. He looked sideways at Draco, but Draco looked sore and didn't seem to be affected. Did I hear it wrong? Surprius immediately chose to doubt himself. It may be that he has been under a little bit of mental stress recently, and it is quite reasonable for him to be in a trance and hear hallucinations for a while. Come, I'm waiting for you here. The voice appeared again the next second, with a chilling and vicious tone. This time, Sepulus could not think that he was hallucinating. He turned to look at Draco again, and Draco asked softly, "What's wrong?" "It's okay." Sepulus shook his head. At this moment, Natasha quickly climbed onto Surprius's shoulder. "Go back and talk." Sepulus was stunned for a moment, and suddenly understood why Draco didn't respond. It could be a snake talking. Natasha's voice was unusually tight, and Surprius thought it might be a snake that was not very small. So he reached out and took Draco's wrist, speeding up their pace back. As soon as she returned to the dormitory, Natasha quickly jumped from Surprius's shoulder to the table. "There is something extraordinary, a big snake." Natasha's voice was tight. "It's very scary. It's the pressure of the same kind. It's very scary." Her nervousness alerted Tom, who was resting in the diary. Tom was suspended in front of the desk and narrowed his eyes in confusion. "What's going on?" "I heard something on the way back just now," Surprius briefly described. "I heard it, Draco couldn't hear it, Natasha heard it, and Natasha said it was very powerful. Another big snake." Tom's brows furrowed. "Where is Hogwarts safe?" "I don't think it's that safe here," Sepulus exclaimed in agreement. "Why are there even big snakes now?" "I feel that it is not difficult for that powerful snake to bite a student." Natasha added weight to this fact. Sepulus and Tom looked at each other, and both saw something fishy in the other's eyes. "The crazy me," Tom said after a moment of silence. "It's possible." Surprise's expression didn't look good. "I do feel that something is wrong, but I'm not sure. What must you have experienced in the future to become so crazy?" Tom rolled his eyes in rare annoyance. "If you ask me, I don't know." "What are you going to do?" "Just pretend that you don't know for now." Sepulus hesitated for a moment, then decided, "I'm pretending to be stupid. If you are really crazy, you will find it on your own, so you don't need to worry about me." Tom thought this was very feasible, so he nodded. "That makes sense. Oh, by the way, you are not here today. I have been listening to Flower Appreciation on the radio all day." Although Tom was not in the diary when Draco came that day, this did not prevent him from hearing the entire communication process between Surprius and Draco. "What did you hear?" Sepulus turned his head and glanced at the roses still blooming on his bedside. "Roses are generally used to show love," Tom said with certainty. "I listened carefully to the analysis today, and I think yours may be the Blue Rose of Versailles." "What is that thing?" Surprius heard the name. "I think it must be a very expensive thing. Bull won't let me charge a large sum of money to the debt of gratitude." "Expensive as the next best thing." Tom's expression suddenly became a little narrow-minded. "The blue rose in the Palace of Versailles represents the wizard's love for the wizard." He lengthened his voice, and as he wished, he saw Surprius slowing down in changing his school uniform. "And your classmate must have recognized this flower that day. He had such a big reaction to Wolf giving you this rose, he couldn't be preparing to show his love to you." Surprius unbuttoned his shirt and fell into a certain degree of thought. "Maybe not." Surprius was still trying to find a reason for himself. "After all, what you listened to today was just the radio, and you didn't definitely see the appearance of the flowers." But even after a quibble, he couldn't go on. Because if it were defined by love, Wolf's kindness to him, Draco's gaffe that day, and the way he picked him up and took him back to the lounge today seemed to have very reasonable explanations. "But what do they love about me?" Surprius asked Tom, with a rare expression of confusion in his eyes. "Can this be defined as love between lovers?" "I don't know." Tom shook his head happily. "I didn't think about it." "I didn't understand it either." Surprius snorted, lying on his back on the sofa. "It's really complicated, and troublesome and scary. Have you noticed, Sepulus, you are running away from this. You are running away from love." Natasha finally joined the conversation after the previous tirade. "Tom, you are too." The words of a ghost calling a snake attracted his attention, and they both turned to look at her. "Is there any?" Sepulus said stiffly. "I don't think so." Tom followed suit. But after the next time they looked at each other, they both seemed like balloons that had been popped. "Maybe a little bit." Surprius looked downcast. "Maybe I just don't understand. There aren't any good examples in orphanages." Tom also used this excuse. "Yeah, I grew up in that orphanage too, and everyone was so annoying." Although Natasha didn't know what Tom was like back then, she grew up with Surprius. She turned her head and thought about it, and felt that the two people were saying the same thing. "Surprius, what have you been doing recently? Aren't you brewing some love potion?" Can that thing help you understand what love is? Probably not. Serples thought about the annotation on the love potion in the book. It does not make the user truly fall in love with someone, because love cannot be generated or imitated. That's what the book says. Quote. Natasha flicked her tail. That's it. Oh, but the book also said that the love potion will raise steam that spirals upward. If you already have someone you love in your heart, you can smell the scent of the person you love in the steam. Serples added. Then, take it back and smell it after it's done. Natasha continued to give ideas. Maybe you'll know who you love after you smell it. It works. Tom also thought this method was reasonable. I can't smell it, so I'll leave this task to you. Sepulus nodded seriously. Serple's potion talent did not disappoint him. 3 days later, with Professor Snape's affirmation, his love potion was freshly made. He put a little of it in a bottle himself, and then entrusted the rest to Professor Snape, asking him to help him sell it. Professor Snape agreed nonchalantly. He was a big potion dealer, and countless potions were sold on the market from his hands. It was just a matter of selling love potions. Serples took the vial of love potion back to his dormitory, but on the way, he met Ginny Weasley again. A bit of a narrow road encounter. But there were other people around. Serples felt that he should be safe and nothing would happen to him, so he just avoided it a little and walked forward against the wall, but he was still hit by Ginny. Full of arms. It's hard to say it wasn't intentional. Sir Prius felt very complicated when he was helped up by Ginny in a panic. I walked to the wall to avoid you, and you bumped into me. Isn't this a bit rude? Immediately afterwards, Ginny thrust a heavy object into Serples' hand. The little girl ran away quickly, leaving Serples standing in the corridor with the diary in his hand. He lowered his head and looked at this well-made diary that didn't look cheap, and he suddenly had a bad guess in his heart. Can't another Tom emerge from this diary? He just thought about it for a moment, and then immediately shook his head to get the thought out of his mind. Dear Salazar Slytherin, I never thought of such a thing just now. Please don't let it become a reality. I don't really want to see a Tom other than the Tom in my dormitory. He had thought about whether to simply throw away the diary in his hand and pretend that he hadn't seen it, but he was afraid that Ginny would pick it back up later and think of other ways to get the diary to him, so he finally stuffed the diary into his hands. I put it back in my school bag and took it back to the dormitory. Have you brought the love potion back? Tom quickly appeared next to Serples, and Natasha also curiously leaned over and raised her neck to look around. Actually, I feel that the ones in our house can be considered finished products. I am quite confident in my craftsmanship, Serpris said, taking out the bottled magic bottle he brought back from his bag. He took the medicine and put the bag on the sofa aside. Is this the love potion? Tom looked at the liquid in the bottle with a little emotion and curiosity. It's really magical, smell it quickly. A ghost and a snake looked at the people in the room eagerly. Sir Prius nodded, unscrewed the bottle cap, then leaned over, carefully raised his hand and waved, sending the rising cyclone to the tip of his nose. But it has no taste. Sepulus was stunned for a moment and took another breath. Still no taste. He was so anxious that he didn't care about the correct way to inhale. He took the bottle and took a deep breath. Still nothing. What's going on? Tom saw that Serples' reaction was wrong, and raised his hand to try to stop Serples' movement, but he was just a ghost, and he couldn't touch Serples. Another hand pinched Sir Prius' wrist. Save it, little one, you can't smell it. Only then did they notice that there was an extra person in the room. His hands were too cold, which made Sepulus pull his hands out in a panic. It is the product of a love potion. Do you expect that you can find love from a love potion? This guy who suddenly appeared spoke lightly and with a bit of teasing sarcasm, causing Sir Prius to frown. Tom responded quickly. We, the guy who suddenly appeared in the room said with a smile on his face. Hey, it looks like you don't know yet, does it? His eyes passed over the large row of cauldrons placed behind Sepul's dormitory, and there was a well-concealed hatred in his eyes. It seems that your progress is slower than I thought. He turned to look at Serpris, who was facing an enemy, and Tom, who was full of defensiveness. Oh, these love potions will be used in the future, okay, used to develop the first batch of disposable believers. Don't be so hostile to me, baby snake. He was extremely calm and even took the time to say hello to Natasha in snake language. Tom turned to look at Serples. What did you do again? What did I do? Serpulus felt that this was not his problem. I didn't do anything. Serpulus paused, then turned to look at the guy in front of him. He probably wasn't a ghost, because he touched Serpulus's hand. He wasn't like Tom who couldn't touch objects, but he didn't look very good either. Like a living person. Black hair, pretty handsome face, Serpulus glanced between Tom and the unexpected visitor. You, how old Riddle are you? Serpulus thought he had discovered the answer to the matter. 16 years old, Riddle in front of him said calmly. Not bad, he's not too stupid, he actually reacted. You or me too. Tom floated over and stood in front of Serpulus. Yes, I am you. Riddle naturally found a sofa and sat down, but I am different from you. You were just an accident caused by obsession, and I was indeed a child when I was 16 years old. Time, the most perfect work. What's the difference? Tom sneered. Aren't they all fakes? Riddle's face darkened. It's different. Serpulus came over to help Tom. He is the ghost caused by that madman, and you are the soul of my family. How can it be the same? Riddle's expression worsened. After being stiff for a long time, he sneered. You two have a good relationship. It should be. Serpulus nodded with a smile. Although technically you are both the same person, 11-year-old Tom is much more likable than you. Riddle seemed to have heard some joke and raised his finger and pointed at Tom. Likable. Him. He is just an immature fool who is still longing for love. If he continues to grow up in Hogwarts, you will become the same person as me, and even you will be the same. Aren't you also a product of the original body, and no one of us is nobler than the other? There was no way to refute this point. Serpulus pursed his lips and looked at each other with Tom. The three people in the room were all related to Tom Marvolo Riddle, who was still in his 20s and still crazy. You just said that we are the product of love potion, what do you mean? After exchanging a few glances with Tom, Serpulus coughed lightly, grabbing Natasha with one hand and picking up the one where Tom was staying with the other. The diary was stuffed into his arms and he sat opposite Riddle. What do you know? I know who my parents are, and I also know how pathetic my poor mother is. Riddle lengthened his voice and looked at Tom, his tone full of ridicule. You will still go to worship her. Use the too pitiful money you finally saved to buy flowers for her. It's a pity, she is just a stupid woman who brought it upon herself. If I were you, I wouldn't be so mean. Tom was much calmer. Facing Seppel's worried gaze, he could still smile reassuringly at Seppel's. After all, I am Zhang Jin. You have also done this before buying flowers to worship. The smell of gunpowder is good. Seppulus shrank back slightly into the sofa. Riddle's response was a sneer. Yeah, that's why I feel particularly unhappy when I see you, because you represent my stupid past. Serpulus knocked on the water glass at hand and intervened. Speaking of business, no personal attacks allowed. Riddle sneered again. He didn't even attack, Tom said calmly, he's far worse than the bigger one. Riddle may be a little annoyed. This time he did not answer Tom's words. Instead, he turned his head, looked at Serpulus, and told a story in a calm and slow voice. A story that might be considered a love story. A beautiful witch fell in love with a Muggle man at first sight. She desperately wanted to get the man's love, but the man kept away from her, just because the woman was a wizard and the man was afraid of this power. A woman who was carried away by love did something wrong. She pretended to be relieved and asked the man out for one last meeting. However, she added a love potion to the man's wine glass, creating an illusory love. Under the influence of magic, the man lost his judgment. He followed the medicine and fell madly in love with the woman. He married her and spent a confusing but happy life. They even had a child of their own. The woman was pregnant. The pregnant woman began to become sentimental, and she began to think about whether her initial choice was correct. She suddenly had a bold idea. If she lifted the magic control at this time, would a man fall in love with her? The woman was captured by this long illusory sweetness. She became blindly confident. She felt that the man would love her and they would have a happy family. She lifted the magic control and drank the antidote to the man. If this is a love story about coaxing a little girl, then the next plot trend should be that the man changes his mind and falls in love with this stupid woman who is full of him, right? Riddle's voice was calm and without any ripples. Serpulus carefully looked at Tom's expression. Tom's expression was a little bit worse at this time. After all, Tom is an 11-year-old soul, and he should still care about his deceased mother. But reality is not a fairy tale love story. The man who woke up from the magic had no love for the pregnant woman in front of him, only fear and hatred. He angrily cursed the woman for doing this to him. The man fled in a hurry, leaving only the woman crying in pain. The poor woman gave birth under this grief. She gave birth to her child in pain in her originally happy home. But she was already too weak. She has to pay for the love she wrongly paid for. In the end, she only had time to let go of her weak body and sent her poor child to an orphanage, from which she never woke up. We are the product of the love potion. Riddle's voice was very calm. He calmly elaborated on an established reality and also elaborated on this story that no longer caused him to have emotional fluctuations. We have no ability to love. How do you know this? Serples asked. Tom had already fallen into a certain degree of thinking, so he should take over from Tom and continue asking. This summer when I was 16, I went to Little Hangleton village to search for my life experience, Riddle answered happily, but this is no longer important to me. I learned more. Or rather we, are descendants of Salazar Slytherin. Tom, who was thinking about this sentence, raised his head in surprise. What? Is it surprising? Riddle laughed, probably because he was very satisfied to finally shock his 11-year-old self. Our stupid mother, Merope Gaunt, is Salazar's. A pure-blood descendant of Slytherin. This can explain a lot of things, right? For example, our talent of being able to talk to snakes. Salazar Slytherin himself is a parselmouth. The huge snake that Natasha heard has something to do with you. Serpulus quickly thought of more things and his expression became slightly serious. Yes, it has something to do with me. Riddle shrugged. This is another quite long story. Why don't I just take you to see it, so that it won't be boring for me to tell? Thank you, but no, Serples refused very simply. I think it's very dangerous. You can't be considered a good person here. Riddle raised his hands and said, oh, sadly, I'm so defensive. I only take it as a compliment. Surprius nodded, just say it. After all, it was you who took the initiative to contact me. I thought you might need me to do something. Riddle smiled. He stood up, walked to Sepal's side and sat down. When Sepals was about to get up and get out of the way, he turned sideways, leaned against Sepals, and hugged him. Sepal's waist, relying on his size difference, held Sepals in his arms, and then rested his chin on Sepal's head. Don't be so defensive, we are all the same person, aren't we? He actually said this not to Serpals, but to Tom. You see, you are a ghost, although I can't be considered a perfect person, but I was able to meet Sepulus, don't you envy me? Tom said nothing. Sepals struggled twice but did not break away. Please let go, you're quite cold. Serpulus pushed the person behind him. Oh, there's nothing we can do about it. Riddle also expressed regret for this. Maybe after Ginny Weasley dies, I can feel a little warmer. What does this have to do with Ginny? Sepals tried his best to get out of Riddle's arms. Please start from the beginning, more carefully, including why you are here and what is that snake. Things, and what these have to do with Ginny Weasley. After carefully connecting all the stories, the whole thing is not complicated. Back then, Tom Marvolo Riddle himself was a very good, diligent student, hungry for knowledge, very polite, handsome, and a student with excellent academic performance. Teachers and students all had a good impression of him. But he longed for power from beginning to end. And he is indeed smart. In his 5th year at Hogwarts, he relied on some legends in the book and all the information he could find to find Salazar Slytherin's secret room hidden in the school on his own. This secret room was left by Salazar Slytherin when he ran away in anger. Just because he and the other 3 college founders gradually disagreed with their teaching philosophies, he left the secret room behind, saying that one day his heir will open the secret room and eliminate those students who are not worthy of learning magic. Riddle found the secret room, and he successfully opened the secret room. He conducted several tentative attacks through the secret room. This was the first time he had mastered it, and he had power that no one else could match. He fought for this secret room. A feeling of fascination. Riddle instigated the basilisk to attack several students. The basilisk, the dangerous snake Natasha heard about, the weapon left by Salazar Slytherin in the Chamber of Secrets. Several attacks were just Riddle's tests, but they resulted in the death of a Muggle-born girl. Due to the murder, the school's board of directors decided to close the school. In order to be able to continue studying in school instead of returning to the orphanage, he didn't have the same treatment as Seppels back then. Riddle had to close the secret room, and at the same time, he premeditatedly blamed the case on a classmate who was 2 grades below him, causing the classmate to be expelled from the school. And through this act of murder, Riddle split his soul for the first time, stored it in his diary, and created the first Horcrux, which is the 16th century soul sitting in front of Seppels. Riddle aged. How did you split your soul? Seppels couldn't help but interjected and asked. In the Chamber of Secrets, Riddle said with a gentle and bewitching smile, there are many books from Salazar Slytherin. They are all good things that cannot be seen outside. Don't you want to take a look? The temptation was indeed great. Seppels' eyes averted for a moment, and instead of answering Riddle's words, he snorted dryly, go on, what does this have to do with Ginny Weasley? Riddle shrugged, looking a little helpless, you're so boring. But he still explained it well. As the soul in the diary, Riddle should have started to have his own consciousness at a later stage, and this will also had a clear purpose at the beginning, which was to ask him to open the secret room. At that time, no one communicated with him, so he was put in a basement. He was just an obsession and very weak. People will think when they are bored for a long time, and Riddle is obviously the same, even though he was just a weak, soul-like thing at the time. I can only live in a notebook. This copy was purchased in a Muggle shop on Vauxhall Road, London. So annoying. He thought a lot in the long loneliness and darkness alone, and finally he thought, why should I listen to the guy who created me? I don't want to listen to him. I can do what I want, why should I listen to him? He didn't create me for my own good, but just to achieve his purpose. No one of us owes anything to the other. Riddle thought and thought in his diary for a long time, and finally felt that he needed allies. Ginny Weasley is just a container for me to absorb life force, Riddle said very calmly. When I succeed, I will be able to have an entity instead of just relying on this diary to survive. He smiled and licked the ends of Seppel's hair. I originally planned to fish in troubled waters and find a way to kill Ginny Weasley by using the excuse of the secret room, but I didn't expect that I actually learned about it from her mouth. Your presence, I think we can work together, what do you think, Seppels? I was born an orphan, brought into the magical world by Dumbledore, and I have a snake as a pet, you or me. Why don't we do something great together? Riddle was laughing, his smile was bewitching. People are arrogant and think, there is no reason. What's the benefit to me of cooperating with you? Serpolis pushed away Riddle's approach, his expression cold, not immune to his deception at all. What do you want? Maybe Salazar Slytherin's collection of books and treasures. Riddle was not annoyed when he was pushed away, but shrugged, I'm not interested in those things, my main thing now is the purpose is to gain freedom from the control of the diary. What you're talking about doesn't appeal to me, Serpolis refused simply. I now know that there is a secret room. Even without you, I might not be able to find it even if I spend some time. Riddle checked his hand, don't be so absolute. This is a negotiation process. Even if we can't reach an agreement, we won't fall out, right? Our interests don't conflict anyway. What he said is true. Cooperation is all negotiated. If there are no common interests will be created. If you have an entity and leave the diary, can you still go back to the diary? Serpels asked. It's hard to explain why there is an extra person in Hogwarts, and Mr. Dumbledore knows you. Can you leave, lose? I can enter the diary. Riddle paused, just like a hermit crab, the diary is my shell, and this shell can be replaced at any time. In essence, I am still not flesh and blood, but the diary can no longer trap me. Me. Seppulus said, oh, and nodded. Tom glanced at Serpels, as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't speak. It's not that I have nothing to ask for, Serpels paused and said after considering, he raised his head and looked at Tom, let's see if you agree. Tell me about it. Riddle raised his chin and asked curiously. I want Tom to be able to have a physical body like you, that's what it means, Serpels said. Is Ginny's life force enough to support her? Riddle said and exaggerated, wow, are you so nice to him? I'm almost jealous, look at me, I'm smarter than him, more handsome than him, more capable than him, want me, I'm much more useful than him. Thank you, but I can't, Serpelus still refused simply, answer the question. So cold, Riddle sighed, looking so sad, Ginny Weasley is not enough. She is only a teenager after all. It is already very difficult for me to complete my physical form. I'm reluctant, but I can't do it if I add another one. So let's talk. Sepulus turned his head and glanced at Tom beside him. I have so many love potions in the house, right? If you need someone, I can find it for you. Riddle's eyes lit up. Let me just say, you or me, we are both the same madman, a madman who will do whatever it takes to achieve his goal. If you can get more people, then of course I can agree your request. It can't be too many. Tom joined the conversation. You said that last time you accidentally killed a student and almost caused the closure of Hogwarts. We also have to control the number. Yes, Riddle smiled. You were right, we can discuss it in the long term. The three of them chatted briefly, and Serpils followed Riddle's request and placed the diary under a sculpture on the first floor. Riddle said that Ginny would go get the diary, and he had to go back and think about it. Think about the plan and make sure nothing goes wrong. You need to cover for me. I need an excuse, Riddle said calmly. I need some reasons to prove why Ginny Weasley went to open the Chamber of Secrets and finally died in the Chamber of Secrets. I need pick me out, or Dumbledore will find out that I bewitched that poor little girl. I think if we didn't reach an agreement at the beginning, you would directly choose to blame me. Serpils said very directly, Slytherin's heir or something. You're right, Riddle snapped his fingers, but then I talked with Ginny and I found that it's a bit difficult to put the blame. You are as kind as I was back then. You said it was because you hated mudbloods. It's hard for anyone to believe it. Serpils said a calm, oh, stuffed Riddle's diary into his school bag and took it away. When he returned to the dormitory, waiting for him was Tom with a slightly complicated expression. What's wrong? Serpils threw his school bag on the sofa aside and went to check his pile of cauldrons. Is it necessary for me to do this? Tom's voice was a little low. That Riddle is very dangerous. It's not safe to cooperate with him. You don't need to take this risk. After another pause, he added, I don't know who's going to die. Tom was only 11 years old, and all his memories were of leaving the orphanage and coming to Hogwarts. His memory stopped even before he arrived at Hogwarts. He only remembered that Dumbledore wanted him to confess things he's done. He has not experienced Riddle's hatred and desire, and he does not understand it. Although he feels sad for her mother Mirokgaunt, whom Riddle mentioned, as a spectator of the story, he has not experienced it, and he has not imagined it. I learned the sadness of my life experience. At most, he felt sad for his mother who was carried away by love. To take the lives of others for your own purposes. It's not that Tom can't do it. Reason will tell him that he should do this, but occasionally the emotion will try to stop and save it, saying that those strangers did nothing wrong, and you probably shouldn't. His current life vision is that Serpils will stay in school and become a professor at Hogwarts, save a lot of money, buy Diagon Alley, and form a home with him, Serpils, and Natasha. This is the future he wants so far. The hand stirring the cauldron froze for a moment. I know the danger, and I know I shouldn't, Serpris said without looking at Tom, but, Tom, don't you want to run into me? His voice was not loud, which sounded sad, but every word was spoken with force and determination. You can walk with me on the streets of Diagon Alley, and Natalia can get into your pocket, instead of you having to hide in the room through the glass and watch me and Natasha together. Go out. You don't have to stay in the dormitory and listen to the radio when I go to class. You can find some books to read by yourself. Although you can't leave the dormitory, you can also be more free. Sepulus' voice was very soft, but his voice was full of new desire. We will succeed, Tom, we can do it. He suddenly turned his head to look at Tom. I will work hard, and you should work hard too, Tom. If you can learn Riddle's method of becoming a physical entity, you can destroy the secret room together with Riddle, so that all risks disappear and everything becomes a secret. There was fire in his eyes. And that flame also lit up Tom's heart. Okay, Tom heard his own voice say, we'll make it. He raised his hand, which was an illusory milky white color. He could not touch Serpilus's face, and just watched his hand pass through Serpilus's face. What does it feel like? It's a bit cold, Serpils said softly. I feel like I'm surrounded by ice water. It'll warm up, Tom said softly. Yes, it will warm up. Serpilus smiled. I suddenly feel that just having a love potion is not very safe. Maybe I should boil some soul-killing water. What do you think? Your professor won't let you. You can go ahead and give it a try. What if you succeed? You have to have faith in me. Serpulus gently moved his face, keeping it in a position just next to Tom's transparent hand. Just pretend that Tom really bumped into him. Sounds good. Love potion as an alternative or something. Tom's voice also lowered, a little gentle, although love still sounds like an unreliable thing. Natasha snaked between the two of them, raised her tail and slapped Sepulus' leg. Does this prove that I can whip Tom with my tail in the future? It does sound good, but Sepulus, it's time for you to go to bed. You are the only one alive out of the three of us. Surprius blinked, and then he smiled, sincerely, okay. Even if you don't say it out loud, even if you try your best to hide the things you hold in your mind, the people around you who care about you will more or less discover them. Surprius sat in the stands of Durmstrang, leaning his chin to watch Wolf play in the sky. He is really handsome, he was already very handsome, with a good figure, and now he is serious. Serpul's dedicated play was a joy to watch. Do you like it very much? Natasha poked her head out of Sepulus's collar. It does look pretty good, but do you really like this one, a sports boy? Don't use any new words you learn, Natasha. Serpulus nodded Natasha's head. Natasha rubbed Sepulus' fingertips. Did I learn it wrong? I'll ask Tom when I get back. Surprius laughed. When I looked up, the game was almost over. The seeker of Wolf's pair was quite powerful. He seemed to have participated in many international competitions. His name was Crumb. Wolf communicated with his teammates after the game in the sky. After chatting for a while, he came down and reached Serpul's. Serpul's handed him the water he had prepared earlier. Is your neck tired? Wolf took a few sips of water and swallowed a little hastily. His Adam's apple rolled, and the water droplets fell into the neckline, and the water droplets would probably cross the full in shape. Nice looking chest muscles, and then I was thinking whether to continue sliding down or touch a wet mark on the clothes. Serpul's was pleased by the picture in his mind, so he looked at Wolf with a clear smile on his face, and said a soft syllable through his nose, huh. Wolf paused for a moment, and suddenly there was something in his eyes as he looked at Sepulus. No, it's nothing, Wolf replied, his voice slightly hoarse. Are you busy later? If not, would you like to take a walk along the lake together? This time walking by the lake in Durmstrang, Surprius felt his heart beating a little too fast. Does this count as a date? It seems impossible, right? The date should be more formal than this. What if Wolf actually asked for a date? Do you agree? What happens after you agree? Serpul's was holding the hot cocoa that Wolf had just bought for him in his hand, and his mind was spinning a little too fast. Are you worried? Wolf walked beside Sepul's and asked softly. Why do you ask that? Serpul's turned his head to look at Wolf and blinked. You looked very tired when you came here recently. Wolf's eyes fell on Serpul's face, describing it boldly but not offensively. Is there anything I can do? Sepul's looked away and pursed his lips. You are always like this, so considerate that I don't know what to say. Wolf smiled softly. Do you like it? There was a smile on Sepulus's lips that he didn't notice. Indeed, I like it. However, he quickly suppressed his smile and turned serious, but I might be a little troubled and need your guidance. You said it, Wolf responded, waiting for Serpul's question. It's not that bothering you very much. When Surprius actually asked the question, he felt a little embarrassed. He coughed softly. Do you think people should really do it in order to achieve their own goals? By any means necessary. Serpulus was still confused. Being able to grasp it intellectually does not mean that it is clear when it comes to actual implementation. Even if he has thought about and studied every aspect, Serpul's will still hesitate, not whether he is doing the right thing, that is obvious. He couldn't mention anything that was definitely wrong to anyone except himself, Tom and Natasha. But if he said he wouldn't do it just because it wasn't right, that was impossible. He still had to do it. Now he hesitates to be pretentious, just because he wants to gain recognition and make himself feel better. After all, he is still young, he still has a conscience, and he cannot be cruel. I may not be able to give you any particularly helpful answers, Wolf frowned and thought seriously. They kept walking and walked a long distance in the gap between thinking. I can only, this life is so short, just do what you want to do. Do you want to do what you want to do? Sepul's muttered and nodded. I understand. I hope I can help you. Wolf said softly, his eyes falling heavily on the side of Sepulus's face. So the next time, when Harry was called by Lockhart to work in the office, he was surprised to see Sepples in Lockhart's office. Seppus. Harry's eyes widened in surprise. How? Why are you here? Lockhart blinked and laughed. Oh, you know each other, that's great, but come on, Harry, let me introduce you again. Cypress Grindelwald, my most loyal. I am a little fan of readers, and he remembers every word in my book. Now he is helping me proofread my new book. Sir Prius smiled sweetly, which made Harry's eyes pop out. It's my honor to be able to help Mr. Lockhart. I will mention you in the special acknowledgments of the new book. Lockhart winked cheerfully and arranged for Harry to sit down and continue his work of writing replies to Lockhart's fans. This night lasted for almost a week before something unexpected happened. First, Seppulus heard the voice of the basilisk again, empty and chillingly speaking words filled with the desire to kill. He didn't take it seriously, he just wanted to let it go after hearing it. Riddle said that the basilisk would not attack students yet, it was just being let out for a walk to breathe, but he saw Harry's hand the pen he was writing in stopped. He watched Harry raise his head blankly, his eyes passing over Lockhart and him. Did you hear anything? What? Lockhart looked up from the book in front of him. You asked when my new shampoo will be launched. Harry's expression froze, and Sepples shook his head gently towards Harry. But soon the sound of the basilisk sounded again, this time closer than the last time. Surprise imagined that the basilisk was walking in the pipe above their heads. Next time, give Riddle a professor's schedule to avoid making mistakes. Seppulus pursed his lips, and Harry raised his head again, with confusion on his face. You really didn't hear that? No, Harry. Surples raised his head and lied calmly. Are you too tired recently and have some delusions? Lockhart felt that what Surples said might be right. He glanced at Harry with a little worry, and then very generously gave both Surples and Harry a break, allowing them to go back and have a good rest. I'll take you to the Gryffindor lounge. Sir Prius patted Harry on the shoulder. You do look very tired. Harry wrapped his scarf. You really didn't hear it. It was a very loud, very close sound, right next to us. Seppulus looked at Harry's emerald eyes and shook his head. I didn't hear anything. After a pause, Surples spoke again. I still believe that Harry, you heard something. But Harry, you have to know that in the wizarding world, hearing sounds that others cannot hear is not considered a person. A good thing. He watched Harry, with a daze and confusion, say the password to the lady in the portrait in the Gryffindor lounge. After the door opened, he didn't forget to wave goodbye to Sepples. He watched Harry walk away. As he walked in, a smile appeared on his face. He can also hear the language of snakes. Natasha just got out of Sir Prius's clothes at this time. She did what she could do very conscientiously, such as speaking in front of any outsiders. Place definitely doesn't talk to Seppulus. It should be. Surpulus smiled. This is an unexpected surprise. We have found the person we blamed. Sir Prius went back to the dormitory and told Tom about it immediately, and Tom was also pleasantly surprised. This went so well. How is the situation over at Lockhart? It's easy to get in touch with him. He's just a braggart. Surprise sank into the bathtub, soaking in the herbal bag Wolf brought him. I'm now curious about how he wrote those books. After all, there are many parts in it that are very real. If you just imagined it, you wouldn't be able to write it to this level. Tom said vaguely. Any guesses? My guess is that this guy stole other people's lives. Surpulus shrugged, using his hand as a small bowl and scooping up a handful of water, but that shouldn't be the case, given his exposure. Someone will definitely come to your door. Killed by him. Tom's thinking became more divergent. Just him. Sir Prius's sarcasm was genuine. To be honest, I don't think it would be difficult for me to bring him down. You might as well say that his only ability is to forget everything and let everything go. It makes more sense that the guys whose lives he stole don't remember what happened. Tom's expression was complicated. You have to remember that you have the gift of a prophet. Sepples blinked and looked away. It can't be such a coincidence. Maybe, but it doesn't matter anymore. After all, you have chosen him to sacrifice, haven't you? Yes, as a sacrifice, let him enjoy it for 2 days. Chapter 71. Ginny Weasley was the blood bag chosen by Riddle himself, and Lockhart was the victim chosen by Surpulus for Tom. A professor who claimed to know everything, who had participated in countless adventures, and was very capable, died in a secret room built by Salazar Slytherin. This was a grand stage that many people could not even imagine. Countless people will be talking about this in the future. Lockhart should be grateful to Sir Prius. Why would he be dissatisfied with such a curtain call, right? Riddle's progress was very fast. After all, Ginny was only an 11-year-old girl. Although she was the youngest child in the family and the only girl, there were too many children in the Weasley family. The care received was very limited. Riddle appeared at the right moment. A gentle, kind and considerate friend in the diary. Ginny was talking to Riddle, telling her all her secrets, telling how she had to come to school in old robes and carrying old books, telling her about being teased, telling her 11-year-old, childish worries. Riddle had an intoxicated smile on his face when he mentioned this to Sepples. Although he kept saying that he found it very boring and patiently coaxed him, but Sepples could see it, Riddle reveled in controlling Ginny. I'm not bragging, Sepples, standing in front of the statue of Slytherin himself in the dark and damp Salazar Slytherin's chamber, which was located lower than the Slytherin common room. Riddle looked at the unconscious Ginny, who was like a puppet, and turned his head to talk to Sir Prius. I have always been able to confuse people at will. That Riddle also said something similar. As long as greed is still there will be no shortage of believers. Sir Prius nodded, affirming Riddle's words in front of him. Yeah, Riddle still had a smile on his face. It's fun, isn't it? Seppulus glanced at Riddle's proud face and did not answer. Instead, he raised his face and looked at the huge sculpture of Salazar Slytherin in front of him. Where does this lead to? The entire Chamber of Secrets is connected to the waterway system of Hogwarts. Riddle proudly told Seppulus. The sculpture of Salazar Slytherin himself leads to the depths of the Forbidden Forest, where the basilisk is. For so many years, I have been searching for food deep in the Forbidden Forest through this water pipe. Deep in the Forbidden Forest. Seppulus nodded. It's indeed very powerful. After confirming the partnership, Riddle seemed a lot more relieved about Seppulus, especially after Tom stopped talking to him, and he looked even more proud. It is indeed a bit floating. Sir Prius and Tom looked at each other. Maybe he really didn't take them seriously. In his heart, he probably felt that everything around him was under his control. In his heart, ordinary people were probably just ants. Sir Prius, he and Tom may be a little stronger than ants, but they are just more advanced ants. Riddle felt that he was the master and could decide the life and death of the ants, so he never thought that the ants would affect his plans. I like this kind of blind confidence. Sir Prius collapsed on the bed. How are you doing there? It's not bad. He's not that defensive about me. Maybe he feels from the bottom of his heart that he was a fool when he was 11 years old. Tom's plan also went smoothly. Even though there were many inconveniences, he still remained unchanged. Be adaptable to all changes. I recently came into contact with a new concept. Tom suddenly said again, turned over on the bed and knocked on Sir Prius' forehead. As part of the cooperation plan, Tom shared part of Ginny's vitality. Although he is not as capable as Riddle in possessing most entities, Tom can already touch things in reality. Touch Seppulus. Natasha read the book again. It wasn't much. Tom said he thought it was enough, but Seppulus didn't think it was enough. What concept? Seppulus turned his head and lay flat on the bed, but turned his head and half of his face was sunk into the soft bed. Split the soul. Tom pointed to his chin and raised his hand to brush away Sir Prius' broken hair. It's a very interesting concept, and it has already been realized, the 16-year-old Riddle in the diary. It's the split soul, and he calls the diary where he lives a Horcrux. Split the soul, Seppulus said in surprise. Can a person live without a soul? Yes, but it is different from normal life. It is recorded in Slytherin's notes that if the soul does not die, a person can gain eternal life. Tom explained to Seppulus seriously, but if the soul is split, this person it is no longer complete, and he may lose part of his ability to empathize, and if the soul splits too many times, the person will gradually become irritable, unstable, and prone to madness. Seppulus' eyes lit up. You mean, the real body? Riddle went crazy because he made too many Horcruxes. This possibility cannot be ruled out. Tom's answer was still conservative. The book does not say it for sure. The possibility of splitting the soul multiple times is still an ideal idea, but a single split should be no problem. His eyes were also shining, and Seppulus understood what he meant immediately. You want me to try it, Sir Prius said softly. A mortal, this is a very tempting proposition. Tom said in a small voice, his eyes falling on Natasha's nest near the fireplace. Natasha is a snake, do you want her to leave us? Don't even think about it. Sepulus's voice turned gloomy instantly. Snakes can only live 30 years, Tom said softly, but if Natasha becomes your Horcrux, she will share eternal life with you and will no longer be troubled by lifespan. Sepulus pursed his lips. What should we do? We need to take advantage of death. Tom held Surprius's hand. Let's take our time. When there is a clear goal, the passage of time will be incredibly fast. Soon, it was Halloween again. Sepulus didn't realize it at all. Draco came to ask Sepulus about his preparations for Halloween. When I was looking for a dress, I suddenly realized that it was already October. I haven't thought about it. Sepulus propped his chin, taking a rare moment to clear his mind in the busy world. Vampire. Doesn't it sound good? Theodore is already pretending to be a vampire. Draco dismissed Sepulus' idea. Don't be like him, you change him. Huh, Sepulus blinked in confusion. Then what are you pretending to be? Elf, Draco said. Prince Elf, I have ordered all my clothes. An accident happened on Halloween last year. Aren't you afraid that something else will happen this year and your clothes will be ordered for nothing? Sepulus smiled with squinted eyes, thinking about Draco dressing up as an elf. What a prince would be like. Stop it, don't talk. Draco felt as if he was facing an enemy after listening to Sepulus's words. It's nothing, but something might happen if you open your mouth. Don't say anything. You want to think about it now. Think about what you are going to pretend to be. Sepulus blinked innocently. Are you planning to launch the first attack on Halloween? Sepulus frowned and looked at Riddle in front of him. What's wrong? Riddle was a little confused about Sepulus's reaction. Hogwarts will hold a dinner party on Halloween. This will be the time when the students gather the most, and it is also the best opportunity to frame the blame. Sepulus waved his hand. I know, I just know deeply that my reputation as a crow's mouth will never go away. He sighed and motioned for Riddle to continue. After knowing that the Halloween party would be disrupted again, and that he would play a very important role in the disruption, Sepulus began to feel less concerned about his Halloween costume. I ordered a set of dark red shirt and new black suit trousers that I can wear every day. The coat is a very thick deerskin coat that blocks the wind. It is decorated with 2 hairpins. I cast a transformation spell and turned into 2. With a moving wolf ear clipped to his hair, he pretended to be a werewolf. You must be the cutest werewolf in the whole room, Sepulus. Daphne excitedly moved closer to look at the ears on Sepulus's head. Can I touch them? Okay, Sepulus nodded, complying with Daphne's little request. The ears can move. As a result, after Daphne set the precedent, not only Draco Theodorbers came to join in the fun, but even Pansy, dressed as a calm and dignified elf queen, came and pinched Sepulus's wolf ears. Very cute. Sepulus smiled coquettishly. I was praised, but I wasn't very happy. Especially when he heard that Dumbledore had booked a skeleton dance troupe, Sepulus was even more unhappy. After all, his mission today means that he will most likely miss the opportunity to meet this dance troupe. How much do you think it would cost me to hire this dance troupe to dance for me again? Sepulus said angrily. I don't think it costs a lot of money, Natasha comforted Surprius. If you like it, hire a dancer and bring it to Nurmengard so your father can watch the excitement. It makes sense. Sepulus nodded and decided to put this matter on the schedule. On Halloween night, Sepulus stayed in Professor Snape's office for a while, watching his new doctor boil a pot of bone elixir, which was prepared for the subsequent Quidditch game to prevent students from falling during the game. Broken arms and broken legs. Professor Snape doesn't like the festive atmosphere of Halloween, where everyone is having fun together, so he will be the most advantageous timeline proof for Sepulus. When he heard the sound of the basilisk rising above his head, Sepulus cast a warming charm on his cauldron, then said goodbye to Professor Snape and walked to the auditorium. Naturally, his speed was not as fast as that of the basilisk. He had personally walked this journey many times and conducted experiments on how long it took to walk from Professor Snape's office to the second-floor lobby outside the auditorium. Sure enough, he walked to when he turned the corner outside the first floor, he saw water stains on the ground. Riddle had done his part. Surprius raised his legs and continued to walk forward, thinking about how he should fall and scream so as to appear pitiful without being pretentious. At this time, he saw Cedric coming from the corner. Oh my God, Slytherin, you are so kind to me. Serpils kept crossing himself in his heart, thinking that he was so lucky, so he stopped and showed a surprised look. Brother Cedric. Serpils waved cheerfully and stood there waiting for Cedric to come to him. Happy Halloween. Huh, happy Halloween, Sepals. Cedric was also surprised to see Sepals here. Why are you here? The show is about to end at this time. I was brewing the bone spirit in Professor Snape's office. Serpilis smiled a little sheepishly. There's a Quidditch match coming up soon. I kind of forgot about the potion. It's time to wait until the step in your hand is over, and that's it. Sepulus blinked. Why is Brother Cedric coming here at this time? It's also because the Quidditch match is approaching. Cedric smiled a little sheepishly. I was writing a game plan, but I got so obsessed with it that I delayed it for a long time. If my roommate hadn't been there, at the party, I might just not come over today. It was natural for them to walk together when they met, so when Surprise saw the dim torch on the wall illuminating the huge red words in blood, he saw Mrs. Norris's stiff body hanging on the torch stand. When he saw Harry Potter standing in front of the wall again, he let out a scream very naturally and then shrank into Cedric's arms. Cedric subconsciously stretched out his hand to catch the boy who jumped into his arms. He also did not forget to grab the back of the boy's head and bury him deeper in his arms even though he was quite nervous. Don't be afraid, I'm here. Surprius's screams brought Harry Potter back to his senses. He turned back in panic and waved his hands at the two people, saying that it was not him who did it, and that this place was already like this when he came. Of course Sepulus knew it wasn't Harry. Although he also wondered why Harry appeared here, his original plan did not involve Harry. He and Riddle just planned to do a warm-up today to let everyone know that the Chamber of Secrets had been opened. But Harry actually delivered it to the door. This is awesome. Do you have any special physique? If something happens, you will definitely be at the scene of the crime. Sepulus complained in his mind, but it didn't stop him from shrinking into a small ball in Cedric's arms. Stand there, Harry, Cedric said with seriousness in his voice. He patted Serpils gently on the shoulder. Are you okay, dear? I may need your help to call Principal Dumbledore over. Quote. Sepulus raised his head from Cedric's arms, his eyes were red, and he was still crying as he was about to shed tears. Even the little ears on his head were drooped, but he still nodded seriously, agreed to the request to find Principal Dumbledore. But there was still no need for Sepals to look for it. Surprise's scream just now has attracted some students who were a little bored because the dinner was about to end. After they had drunk and eaten, they talked and laughed happily, with messy footsteps and pushing and shoving, of people poured into the corridor. But when they saw the situation in front of them and saw the cat hanging upside down on the wall, all the lively sounds disappeared. Everyone could only see Harry standing blankly in front of the wall, Cedric looking at him with a serious face, and Sepals hiding in Cedric's arms and panicking. The bloody writing on the wall was particularly frightening at this time. The secret room has been opened, and the successor is an enemy, so be on guard. The scene was chaotic for a while. There were more screams, noises, shouts and discussions. Cedric loudly ordered the students present to evacuate, not to gather, and not to discuss. He asked a Hufflepuff student next to him to invite Dumbledore. He arranged calmly and stepped forward to help Harry, who was sitting on the ground and explaining in a panic. Wait for Principal Dumbledore to come over. Cedric's voice was very calm. He comforted Harry, and then he obeyed. When other students came over, he never let go of Sepulus's in his arms. Back. Are you okay? Cedric asked softly. It's okay. Sepal's eyes were a little dodgy. I was just scared. It's okay. Cedric looked at Serpil's face, sighed, untied his scarf and wrapped it around Serpils's. Dumbledore arrived quickly, and he was obviously stunned when he saw the situation here, especially when he saw Harry and Sepulus both there. Minerva, Headmaster Dumbledore said, bring these three young gentlemen to my office. Professor McGonagall's face didn't look good either. She nodded, then quickly walked forward, supported Harry, and nodded towards Cedric. Cedric showed a slightly shallow smile towards Professor McGonagall, and then followed Professor McGonagall's footsteps, half coaxing and half holding Sepulus in his arms. I'm much better. Serpils tried to take away the hand held by Cedric. I'm fine. Appropriate weakness can attract pity, but is it a bit too much? Surprise felt Cedric's nervousness towards him, and felt a little guilty for no reason. Cedric just raised his hand and touched his head. He was really treated like a child. Surprius lowered his head and stared at the tips of his shoes. Even after sitting down in Principal Dumbledore's office, Cedric opened his mouth and asked for a glass of hot milk for Surprius. What's going on? Professor McGonagall was still serious. Seprus was frightened just now, Cedric said calmly, he needs hot milk. No, Professor. Surplius thought his face might be red. I'm much better now, I don't need. Professor McGonagall's eyes stayed on Surpil's face for a while, and then looked at Cedric, who was still insisting. Suddenly, a helpless smile appeared on his face. You all need a glass of hot milk, maybe I need it too. When Principal Dumbledore returned to his office with Professor Snape, the two men saw the four people in the room sitting neatly on the sofa, each holding a glass of hot milk. Then I'll have a drink too, Dumbledore said after a few seconds of silence, choosing to do as the Romans do. What about you, Severus? No. Professor Snape's expression was not very good. He still had an iceberg face and stood there as if everyone present owed him 1,000,000 galleons. So what happened? Dumbledore's voice was still very warm and kind. Harry, tell me. Harry stood up excitedly since Dumbledore entered the door, but did not speak. Now, with Dumbledore's permission, he immediately spoke out. I didn't do it. I was attending the Ghost's Forbidden Party, and nearly headless Nick invited me, Harry said hurriedly. I saw this me on my way back. He spoke in a hurry, his face flushed with anxiety, but he was interrupted by Professor Snape. Why don't you go directly to the auditorium, but to the hall? This is not the shortest route from the Forbidden Party to the auditorium. Quote. Harry's face turned red. I want to go back to the Gryffindor common room first. Not going to have dinner. Mr. Snape raised his eyebrows. As far as I know, there won't be anything appetizing at the taboo party. Harry's face turned redder and he looked more embarrassed and anxious. I'm not hungry. Professor Snape smiled softly, for Harry's reason was totally untenable. Then I want to know, why are you here, Sepples? Dumbledore's voice sounded softly, relieving Harry. I'm coming from Professor Snape's office, Seppulus said in his mind, saying something he had already prepared and had rehearsed for Tom many times. I'm regenerating bone spirits to prepare for the upcoming Quidditch game. I was preparing for the game. I waited until the living flower reacted with the medicine and turned a safe milky white color before I left the professor's office. He paused, lowered his eyes and thought seriously, without looking at Dumbledore's face. Dumbledore was a wise old man, and he couldn't guarantee whether he would see any flaws by looking at Dumbledore's face. When I came up from the stairs, I saw Brother Cedric, Senior Cedric. We exchanged a few words and planned to go to the auditorium together. But as soon as I turned the corner, I saw the writing on the wall and Lori Mrs. Silk. Seppulus's voice was very low, as if he was very scared. Is this true? Dumbledore turned his eyes to Professor Snape and Cedric on his side. Cedric nodded. Dumbledore turned to Professor Snape. Where are you, Severus? Is that true? Professor Snape looked very dissatisfied and said in a bad tone. Dumbledore, I don't understand why you cling to Grindelwald, who has no problems, but keep silent about Potter, who is full of loopholes. What are you thinking about? Quote. Oh, don't be angry, Severus. Principal Dumbledore smiled gently. I just don't let go of any possibility, but of course, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Professor Snape looked very annoyed. As you wish. Don't be so angry, Severus, Dumbledore said very calmly. Mrs. Norris still needs you, Mandrake Resurrection Potion. Professor Snape's response was to turn around and leave, but after taking a few steps, he turned back, pulled Sepples in front of him, and took off Hufflepuff's yellow scarf from his neck. Throw it to Cedric. I took it away, he said forcefully, and then dragged Surprius out of Dumbledore's principal's office. Surprius was really flattered. Professor, he said nonchalantly, and Professor Snape slapped Surprius on the head. It wasn't heavy, it was said to be a hit, but in fact it was more like a hard slap. Be calm lately and don't run around. He left such a sentence bluntly, then turned around and walked away, leaving only Sepples with his back with the corners of his robe billowing. Okay, Professor. Sepples nodded in agreement, then trotted quickly to keep up with Professor Snape. Sepples planned to share the night's events with Tom as soon as possible after returning, but found Theodore sitting in the lounge on the first floor. He saw Sepples coming back and waved to him. Surplius walked over, a little confused. Theodore, why didn't you go to bed? You couldn't have been waiting for me. Theodore must have dressed up carefully today. He seems to have put on makeup. Anyway, he looks even better than usual. He is a super beautiful young vampire. Waiting for you. You didn't go to the auditorium at night. I heard from Blaze that you seemed to be at the scene where the word in blood was found, so I wanted to stay and wait for you. Theodore still had a book in his hand, and he seemed to I read a book every time I sit in the common room. Cepulus smiled. Hey, you care about me so much, I'm embarrassed. What are you looking at? A History of Hogwarts. Theodore stood up the book and showed the cover of the book to Serpils. I heard about the Scarlet Letter and took a detour to the library. After all, and I didn't know much about secret rooms before this. Serpris became a little interested when he heard this, the Chamber of Secrets. This is also mentioned in Hogwarts, A History. After a pause, he added, so what exactly is the Chamber of Secrets? Is it a legend or a curse? Or is it simply a secret chamber in the literal sense? As a child from a non-magical world, he felt that he shouldn't reveal that he knew too much. The description in the book says that this is a sensational story. Theodore flipped through the book and smiled reassuringly at Serpils. It said that the Chamber of Secrets was left by Salazar Slytherin. There are terrifying beasts inside. When his descendants come to open the Chamber of Secrets and eliminate all those who are not worthy of learning magic, relatively speaking, if the Chamber of Secrets is really opened, Slytherin may still be the safest place. Cepulus nodded. That's right. It does feel like I feel more at ease in Slytherin. Serpris smiled at Theodore. Thank you for waiting for me here and comforting me, Theodore, but I was shocked at the time, but I'm much better now. I will definitely be able to sleep at night. Very fragrant. Theodore nodded, with a smile on his lips. This is the best. He collected the books, followed Serpils upstairs, and said goodnight to Serpils at the door of the dormitory. Serpils returned to the dormitory, tapped a rhythm on the table with his fingers, and then Tom left the diary and appeared in front of Serpils. Ever since they decided to plot against Riddle, Cepulus and Tom had agreed on a secret code. If the secret code was wrong, Tom would never leave the diary. How's it going? Tom asked softly. It went well. Serpilus took off his coat and threw it on the sofa, unbuttoned a few buttons on his shirt, and threw himself on the sofa. But Dumbledore doesn't trust me. The alibi was very strong, and even when I met Cedric on the way, he gave me a double insurance, and Harry broke the Scarlet Letter directly before me, so Dumbledore still doubted me more. He angrily took out a licorice wand and hung it in his mouth, relying on a little sugar to calm down. He doesn't trust me. Then we have to be more careful from now on. We must be picked out cleanly, and Riddle must die too. Cepil's eyes fell in the air unfocused. Riddle cannot fall into Dumbledore's hands, otherwise, according to his personality, in order to protect himself, he will not hesitate to sell Cepils and Tom, and then everything will be over. I found something in Slytherin's library. Tom stood behind Serpris, his cold hands loosening Serpris' shoulders. The basilisk's fangs can destroy Horcruxes. Serpris said, oh, can you win the trust of the basilisk? Basically not. Basilisk is very close to Riddle. It is difficult to convince him, and there is a risk that he will turn against Riddle. Then kill them all. Cepulus gritted his teeth. No surprises can be left. It's not easy to kill a basilisk, Tom reminded Serpris. Then throw Harry into it. Cepulus frowned. Dumbledore will not watch his knights charge into battle with nothing. No matter how bad he is, he will give his knights a sword. Bar. Tom sighed. Thank you. For a better tomorrow. Cepulus patted Tom's cold hand on his shoulder with his backhand. It's all worth it. I just hope everything goes right. He smiled again after speaking, as if to appease Tom's mood. I remember that there was a statue of the Virgin Mary on the 3rd floor of the orphanage. Should we also believe it and pray for it, just in case it comes alive, right? Quote. That's the Holy Mother of the Muggle world. You should offer it to the Wizarding world. Serpils indeed succeeded in diverting Tom's attention. You offer it to Merlin. What they are always willing to say when I listen to the radio. Merlin's beard, Merlin's blessing, maybe it's more reliable. Cepils was convinced. Okay, I'll go to the Ollery to make an order tomorrow. The secret room and the bloody writing on the wall caused panic for a period of time, but it did not last long. It may be because there were no subsequent scary events, or it may be because of the upcoming Quidditch match. This time Slytherin and Gryffindor were drawn together in the first draw. Bolstered by the prejudices of the academy, both teams were extremely excited. Even they were reluctant to go out to watch the game, claiming that Quidditch was rude. Pansy, who has no sense of beauty, dressed up as much as she could and went out with the Slytherins on Saturday. I think it's because it's Draco's first official appearance in the game. Surprise quietly leaned over to whisper to Theodore. In front of him, Draco stood on one side and Pansy on the other. Stolia, with a posture of hugging her from left to right, is very blessed. However, he himself did not look happy but a little troubled. He kept looking back, not knowing who he was looking at. Yes, it's very possible, Theodore said calmly to trouble Draco, the two of them have always been close. Where's your gentlemanly demeanor, Theodore? Blaise, who was listening, interjected. Theodore turned his head and glanced at Blaise, and actually smiled. Your gentlemanly demeanor. Merlin, what did you do to our Theodore? Blaise's face looked a little horrified. Who are you? Theodore just shrugged calmly. You should not be a gentleman all the time, Blaise, you have to seize the opportunity. Blaise said, wow, and hesitantly made a gesture of applause to Theodore. You were really scary. Surprise didn't understand what riddle they were playing, and he looked around a little confused and wanted to ask, but Daphne patted him on the shoulder. Listen to me, don't ask. Sepulus. The competition starts at 11 o'clock at noon, but almost everyone has arrived at 10 o'clock, grabbing good positions, finding excellent angles and so on. Today is a bit humid and hot. There is a faint thunder in the sky, which seems to indicate the possibility of rain, so the seat with an umbrella in the center of the stand has become the most popular place. Surples and the others were very lucky to grab it. Let's go. Draco and the Slytherins waved their hands and turned to go to the team's lounge. The Slytherin players were in high spirits, and everyone was holding their new brooms with great airs. It's indeed worth being happy. Blaise clicked his tongue twice. Gryffindor's Sideswipe series is incomparable to Nimbus 2001. Surprise's eyes once again fell on the brooms from the Malfoy family. Those brooms were no longer as new and smooth as the last time he saw them. It was obvious that each one had received frequent and good maintenance recently. Even Draco himself, Surples has seen less of him recently, and has gone to Quidditch training. The house prejudice at Hogwarts is really serious. He couldn't help but think about that day on the Quidditch pitch. Who was the Gryffindor girl? Hermione or Ginny? What came out of her mouth was to accuse Slytherin. Quidditch team, mocking Draco is a team that relies on money. Surples couldn't remember who had said this, but he hoped it wasn't Hermione. Hermione is just a little witch who has joined the wizarding world for less than 2 years. If she really blurted out this sentence, it would be too sad. It's a matter left over from history. Blaise touched his chin. Salazar Slytherin and Godric Gryffindor always quarreled, and then something happened again, harmful. Halfway through his words, he couldn't continue and could only cough. That's it anyway. Slytherin's reputation has never been very good. Everyone is used to it. Just watch the game. Sepulus nodded silently and cast his gaze on the leaden sky. The game was slightly stalemate. The Quidditch teams of Slytherin and Gryffindor were relatively evenly matched, but the batters on Slytherin's side were more powerful than those on Gryffindor's side. Sometimes, for the sake of their own safety, the opponent cannot intercept everything. Therefore, the outcome of the final game will most likely depend on the two seekers. Sepulus squinted his eyes and looked up to find Draco among the figures in the sky. After searching for a long time, he found that he was already flying very high, hovering over the entire stadium like Harry. Draco must not be afraid of heights, Sepulus muttered. My feet might be weak if I look down from that height. It started to rain. The rain is not heavy yet, but it has already caused the spectators in the stands to suffer and complain to a certain extent. For those players flying in the sky, the situation will only get worse. Under the overlap of raindrops and human figures, Draco and Harry could be seen moving. Both of them were very fast. They must have discovered the golden snitch and started to capture it, but very quickly, there the marching route began to deviate, all the way from the sky to plunging into the wooden frame covered with cloth under the 4 grandstands. And neither of them slowed down. This is very dangerous. Daphne couldn't sit still for the first time. What is this situation? Draco and Potter saw each other in the sky, and were they going to have a spectacular love affair under the guise of catching the golden snitch? Quote. What an advanced metaphor. Serpil's eyes widened, but he didn't know what happened. It can't be that the snitch has started to crawl into the shelf, right? Is the snitch so smart? Whether he watched Draco's training or Wolf's training before, the snitch would just fly in the sky honestly. There seems to be something behind you. Blaze squinted his eyes and actually took out a pair of retractable binoculars from his pocket. Is it a bludger? You actually brought the equipment from the astronomy class to watch the game. Serpil's eyes widened. You are too well equipped. Be prepared, be prepared. Blaze raised the telescopic telescope in his hand. Next year, yes, the International Quidditch Cup will be held during the holidays next year. Then you can also go and see Serpils. You will find that the equipment is all exaggerated, and there are some that can capture photos, record videos, and provide fixed point commentary, but now let me see if the thing chasing behind Draco and Potter is a bludger. The rapidly changing situation on the field was not going to give Blaze the opportunity to see clearly. Just when Blaze was looking at Draco and Harry attentively, Draco was the first to rush out of the stand. He fell out, and Harry fell out behind him, harder than Draco, and judging from his position, his arm might be broken. At this time, Blaze was finally able to accurately see what was happening below. He held up the telescope and sighed. The golden snitch is in Potter's hands, and Draco's leg is injured. Several people looked at each other, turned around and ran down the stands to check on Draco. Draco fell to the ground. The grass had become wet and muddy in the rain, but the expression on his face was unexpectedly calm. When he saw his Slytherin friends running over, he waved calmly. The leg may have been broken. I couldn't control the direction and fell out. He glanced in the direction of Harry, who was surrounded by the crowd. Potter caught the golden snitch. Several people in Slytherin were silent. They didn't know if they should tell the truth, but this is Draco's first official competition, shouldn't it be too disappointing? In the silence, Serpil said, yeah, he caught it, he probably broke his arm. Oh, then he has better luck than me, Draco snorted, if my injured arm is also my arm, the golden snitch will be mine. He himself was very calm, but several friends around him could not be calm. Surprius took out 2 small medicine bottles from his pocket, took a look at them and handed one of them to Draco, painkillers. Quote. Draco pursed his lips. It doesn't hurt too much, what's the other one? Bone spirit, Serpilus said calmly, but if you drink it here, it will hurt you to death. Let's talk about it after we return to the hospital wing. Draco said. You can endure it. Otherwise, what do you think I was doing in Professor Snape's office recently? Serpilus raised his hand and poked Draco's forehead. I originally thought that I would take the insurance medicine that was prepared for emergencies, but I didn't expect that it would actually work. It's on you. Draco was not annoyed. Instead, he touched his forehead where he had been poked several times. His eyes were full of smiles. Hey, I didn't mean it either, send me to the hospital wing. A large group of Slytherins went to the hospital wing, followed closely by a large group of Gryffindors. Draco's leg is fine. In the world of magic, breaking a leg or an arm is not a serious problem. All you need is a bottle of potion. If you meet someone very powerful, he is quite good at healing spells. An accomplished wizard may solve a problem with just one spell. So Draco just lay in bed and drank a portion of Shengji Yuling plus a portion of painkillers, and he was able to walk quickly and be discharged from the hospital. But the bed where Harry was lying was crowded with people, and it looked like the situation was not optimistic. What's going on? Serpils hesitantly went over to say hello and patted George Weasley on the back. Harry's arm was broken by the bludger. George turned around and smiled when he saw it was Serpils. He greeted Serpils. It was originally a trivial matter. Come to Madame Pomfrey. Just drink some medicine and it will be fine, but Lockhart insisted on treating Harry. His voice couldn't hide the disgust he felt towards Lockhart. As a result, Lockhart's spell was finished, and Harry's entire bones were completely gone. Fred Weasley's voice sounded a little further ahead, and he stepped aside to make way for Harry. Price could see Harry in the hospital bed. Harry's arm looked soft, like a thick, flesh-colored rubber glove, and it felt a little strange to the touch. Harry is going to suffer, Serpilus said sincerely. I'm afraid he will have to stay in the hospital wing tonight. He has more than 30 bones to grow, right? It's $33. Madame Pomfrey, the owner of the hospital wing, came over, chased away the people gathered around the bed, and nodded slightly towards Sir Prius. Thank you for the raw bones. Elixir, Mr. Grindelwald. Sir Prius leaned forward slightly, bowed to Madame Pomfrey, and then walked out of the crowd. Will your bone spirit still be used by Potter? Draco crossed his arms, seeming a little disgusted. Supply for everyone, Sepulus nodded. If someone in Ravenclaw has a broken leg or arm against Hufflepuff tomorrow, he will use the bone spirit that I brewed. He looked at Draco's still somewhat unhappy expression and laughed. Don't be so stingy, Draco. The hospital wing was given credits for using my potion, 50 points. Draco looked at Sepulus deeply. You, forget it, but how can it be only 50 points? At least 100 points. You abandoned the college prejudice and gave the potion to Gryffindor. Got it. Sepulus blinked. A few people laughed and went back to the Slytherin lounge. Serpils took advantage of the time to go to Germany and had a friendly duel with Wolf. After the two, when everyone was soaking in the pool again, Wolf squeezed Serpils' shoulders. You are improving very quickly, Wolf said softly. If I weren't a few years older than you and physically stronger than you, maybe I wouldn't be able to beat you. Sepils nodded in the vapor and said a vague, huh. I heard some news, Wolf said, pressing Serpils' shoulders unchanged, but suddenly mentioned another thing. In Hogwarts, Salazar Slytherin's secret room seems to have been occupied. People are turned on. Sepils raised his eyes and looked at Wolf. Did this matter spread so quickly? Our school has not confirmed that the secret room has really been opened. How come it has already spread outside? It can't be said to have spread completely, but some news has spread, Wolf replied. You are not very safe in Hogwarts. I won't come to Durmstrang if it's not safe, Bull. Serpils stretched his waist and used the opportunity to force Wolf to let go of his hand and retreat slightly. Hogwarts is still quite interesting. Then pay more attention to safety. Wolf received Sepulus's early rejection and didn't mention anything else. He just nodded. Where's the ring I gave you? Oh, that. Serpilus blinked. I showed it to my father. It's a bit too expensive. I don't dare to take it out and leave it in the dormitory. You can take it with you, Wolf responded. The ring has strong magic resistance, which can be regarded as providing some guarantee for your safety. Sepils raised his face obediently and said thank you, but he sighed in his heart. I don't know if it's a good thing. Of course I know, my father also said it's a good thing, but how can I take it out? The Slytherin classmates around me are all knowledgeable, so they came over and asked, how do you like this? This thing can be regarded as a family heirloom. Who gave it to you? Then I babbled and said it was from you, Bulwer Wolf. Although I am a boy, I think reputation is still very important. You gave me an heirloom ring for no reason. What do you want others to think? So Sepulus nodded and agreed, thinking that he would go back and open an account at Gringotts and hide the ring. Serpils went back to Hogwarts and had a peaceful night's sleep. The next day was Sunday. Serpils was not in a hurry and was going to have breakfast in the auditorium, and then go to Durmstrang with his school bag. After sitting in the library for a day, as soon as he went downstairs to the lounge, he saw Blaise waiting for him in the lounge happily, saying that he had something big to share with him. What's the matter? Serpils was still the one who was trying to save face. There was something wrong at Hogwarts last night. Blaise's voice was low, with a bit of suppressed provocation. Some students were petrified. The expression on Sepulus's face froze. He coughed. Don't say this nonsense, Blaise, you have been in the dormitory all night. How can you know so much whether you went out today or not? There is still some way. Blaise raised a finger and shook it mysteriously. Exclusive news, guaranteed quality and quantity. The student who was petrified is now in the hospital wing, and he is a Gryffindor. It is said that he had a camera in his hand when he was attacked, and the whole core of the camera was burned. Quote, the lifelike nose and eyes he described were so real. Why did you share this breaking news with me in the first place? Serpilus coughed. What do you want to do? You are familiar with Madame Pomfrey. Blaise blinked at Sir Prius, full of eagerness and expectation. Are you going to ask? Sepulus only hesitated for a moment, and then readily agreed. Okay, I'll go take a look. It's actually true. To be honest, when he learned from Madame Pomfrey that something had really happened, Sir Prius was quite surprised. He and Riddle had made an agreement that both of them should pay attention to their safety and identity, and not to rush in or anything like that. He didn't expect that Riddle would take action so quickly. He thought he still needed to lay the groundwork. The person who was attacked was a first-year Gryffindor named Colin Creevey. When he was found, he had a bunch of grapes in his hand. According to speculation, he might be planning to secretly visit Harry, who was recuperating in the hospital wing at night. Profit. Madame Pomfrey did not suspect that Serpil's arrival was for anything else. She just sighed and opened the curtain to show Serpils the stiff and petrified Colin Creevey, who was lying inside. His situation is very similar to Madame Norris. We can only wait for the mandrake to grow and try to see if he can recover. Madame Pomfrey looked worried. Everything will be fine, Ms. Pomfrey, don't worry too much, Serpilis comforted Ms. Pomfrey. Professor Snape is a top potions master, trained by Professor Sprout. Mandrake must be the best, and we have Principal Dumbledore, right? It will be fine. Madame Pomfrey's response was a sigh, but she gave Seppulus a hug. Surprius returned to the Slytherin lounge and told Blaise what had happened. It's better to pay attention to safety these days, Serpils concluded. Don't go out in violation of curfew at night. And you, Blaise, what is your source of information? Seppulus raised his eyebrows and asked curiously. Ms. Pomfrey said that it happened last night, including Professor McGonagall and Principal Dumbledore who were sent there, and those who stayed in the hospital wing. There are only 5 Harrys left to recuperate. How on earth did you know? Blaise turned his head and seemed to be trying to act stupid, but Serpil stopped him, eager to get to the bottom of the casserole. In fact, it was not curiosity. When Surprius blocked Blaise's escape route with a smile, he knew it clearly. This is too dangerous. If Blaise had a source of information that could easily know what happened that night, then he might know more, and he might know something he shouldn't know. This is dangerous. Blaise struggled for a while, looking at Serpils, who had made up his mind to know what was going on, and finally raised his hands to express surrender. I say what I say, but it's your money. Seppulus blinked slightly doubtfully. What? This is my big secret. Blaise sat up straight. This is my way of making money. If you want to know, Seppils, just pay for it. I will be your shareholder and I can confess to you. Quote. Seppils said yes in his heart. How much do you want? Well, I don't want you to pay more, just a friendly price, 1 million gold galleons. Blaise touched his chin. How much? Seppils was truly shocked, and at least lowered his voice under Blaise's gesture. What project do you want me to have 1 million gold galleons for? Although not without money. But Serpils is a kid who is used to being poor, and if you ask for his money, you might as well kill him. Moreover, he is still working hard to save money and strive to buy Diagon Alley one day. Do you know the Hogwarts 8 trigrams tabloid? Blaise lowered his voice a little, and after looking at Serpils and nodding to express understanding, he pointed to his face. Mine. Seppulus. Hogwarts 8 trigrams tabloid. The name of the publication is all about it. It focuses on 8 trigrams, and the 8 trigrams are meticulous. Today A and B confess their love, tomorrow B cheats on C, and the day after tomorrow A is heartbroken. I had with a guy of the same gender, and ended up having a threesome with Abid. As long as it is 8 trigrams, no matter how explosive or obscure, we can dig it out for you here, and the quality and quantity are guaranteed to be true. Yours. Serpils was really shocked this time. How did you do it? How you did it is a secret you need to know. Blaise waved his hand. I only charged you 1 million as a friendly price. You will definitely be able to repay the money from this newspaper in a short time. Seppulus was silent for a moment and gritted his teeth. Okay, I'll vote. I'll go back to discuss the contract later. It doesn't have to be so strenuous. Blaise waved his hand calmly. I have kept this newspaper quite confidential. You are the only one investing at the moment, and there probably won't be any more in the future. 100% of the total profit, 10 of them belong to you, so you won't have to waste the effort. After saying this, Seppulus said, oh. Asking him to cooperate was not a spur of the moment, it must have been premeditated, otherwise it wouldn't have been so straightforward. Why do you want to find me all of a sudden? Serpilus still planned to ask. After all, it is more reassuring to know that the other party has something of his own in a cooperative relationship. You have good grades and the teacher likes you, Blaise answered simply. Just like today's matter, if you go to Madame Pomfrey, she will be willing to tell you, but if it were someone else, she would definitely tell you directly. You will be scolded, this is your advantage. Sir Prius said. Oh, again, that makes sense. This is indeed his advantage. Being kind to others and making good friends is the root and persona that Serpulus has gradually revised for himself. Public opinion is also a very important weapon. He wants to ensure that even if one day he does make some mistakes due to something in the future, there will be people who firmly believe that he, Serpulus, would not do such a thing. After all, according to the degree of madness of Riddle's body, Serpulus felt that his life at Hogwarts would not be too boring. So what's the big secret you're hiding? Serpris hit Brace on the shoulder. You assigned me work so early in the morning, and then you tricked me like this. What secret do you have? Quote. Blaze put his arm around Serpulus's shoulders mysteriously. I'm making a deal with the ghost. Sir Prius's eyes opened even wider. Really, I'm not going to lie to you, Blaze shrugged. My partner is the almost headless Nick from Gryffindor. Nearly headless Nick. His neck did not completely move away from his neck, which resulted in him not being able to join the Headless Hunters and being ridiculed by a guy named Patrick. This is the knot in his heart. My mother also became the most well-informed and well-known courtesan in the magical world by virtue of her good communication with ghosts from all over the world. Blaze said very calmly, and he put his arm around Serpul's shoulders. I could coax him into feeling respected and make his hated Patrick and the Headless Hunters unhappy, all at the cost of sharing some innocuously funny 8 trigram stories. Nick had no reason to say no to me, right? Sir Prius left the common room with emotion and admiration. Blaze is a genius. You can actually think of such a thing. It's really awesome. But can nearly headless Nick, the ghost who has already died once, be killed by the basilisk? Sir Prius touched his chin in thought. You can't let Nick continue to work for Blaze. Maybe you can wait for the mandrake to grow and save him later. After all, you also invested in it. If you lose this ghost, your 1 million will be wasted. But now, we still have to find a way to kill this ghost. Sepulus personally took a trip at night with enough invisibility potion to find Riddle in the secret room. Why did you come here all of a sudden? Riddle welcomed the appearance of Sepulus. I didn't bring that oil bottle today. Did you finally realize that I am the best? Don't choose him, come with me. Bar. Riddle would say this almost every time he met Serpulus. I don't know how true or false it was, but Serpulus was used to hearing it and was now able to ignore Riddle's words quite well. Why did you suddenly attack the students? Serpulus didn't listen to Riddle's rhetoric. His goal was very clear. He came to ask questions and confirm his ideas. It was an accident. Riddle spread his hands. It was the kid's own curiosity. He didn't sleep well and heard something while walking at night. He took his camera and wanted to go over and take some big news. He happened to encounter the basilisk. It's just sight. It's no different from what Madame Pomfrey said. The student is not dead, he is petrified, Serpulus and Riddle said. Why? Isn't it said that if you meet the basilisk's eyes, you will die? Riddle smiled, walked closer, raised his hand and touched the corner of Sepulus's eyes. His hands were cold, tracing Sepulus's brows and eyes, bringing some chill that penetrated into the bone marrow. You also said that it was eye contact. The little thing looked at the basilisk through the camera. Because there was a barrier between them, he did not die, but was petrified. You said that if I wouldn't, it'd be too obvious to arrange for Ginny to burn down the greenhouse. I can't wait for the mandrakes to grow. Sepulus did not avoid Riddle's hand, but raised his eyebrows and thought, that is indeed too obvious. It doesn't matter if you ask Ginny to strangle a few roosters. The only one who will pursue this matter is Hi. Mr. G. But if you burn down the greenhouse, Mr. Dumbledore will definitely investigate it personally. Then do you have any good ideas? Riddle smiled and slid his hand along Serpulus's eyebrow to behind his ear. Seeing that Serpulus didn't resist, he continued to slide down until they were passionate. He grabbed Sepulus's waist and pulled him into his arms. Poison, feed the mandrake some grass to wither, Serpris sighed. Next week, I remember that in the first grade class, there is a lesson on fertilizing the mandrake. Add something, control the amount, don't poison it, just inhibit the growth. Serpulus raised his face and looked at Riddle. Your affairs will be finished by the end of the semester at the latest, right? Of course, such a long time is enough. Riddle smiled and hugged Sepulus. Did you come to me just for that unlucky Gryffindor brat? Of course not. I'm here to tell you how to petrify the ghost Nick of Gryffindor. Sir Prius snorted and turned the topic back to business. Why did a ghost offend you? Riddle didn't seem to think that Serpils was here for this, but he didn't refuse, he just said that he knew and he would handle the matter. After all, there is no need to ask so many whys for mutually beneficial cooperation. Surprius nodded to express his satisfaction, then drank some more invisibility potions, and turned back to the Slytherin dormitory. The many pots of love potions in the room before were properly collected and placed on the shelves. Now many of these pots are boiling with invisibility potions. Although the invisibility potion is not completely safe and can still be seen through, under normal circumstances no one will specifically investigate it, so the invisibility potion can bring considerable security to the meeting between Sepals and Riddle. Safety first. Avoid mistakes. For a week, Serpils did not hear the news about Riddle's action. Instead, he first got the news that Hogwarts was going to open a dueling club. It was said to be Dumbledore's instruction and organized and taught by Lockhart. Lockhart teaches. What can he teach? Sepulus looked up at the parchment stapled on the bulletin board with a strange expression. Who knows, but it's okay to go and see the excitement. Draco looked at the bulletin board and lightly bumped Serpil's shoulder. There will be a ceremonial match, the Godfather will fight him. Quote. Sepulus's eyes brightened slightly. In this case, it is indeed worth watching, seeing Professor Snape beat up Lockhart and so on. Sepulus nodded with satisfaction. The Godfather wouldn't be so rude, Draco said, a little dumbfounded, but you, since you don't like Lockhart, why do you do proofreading work for him? He doesn't pay you. Am I here for the little wages? Surprius became serious. If I boil some medicine and ask Professor Snape to help me resell it, I'll get a lot of money, right? Then you go and help him. Draco was puzzled. It's not about helping, Serpilus shrugged. Experience life. I want to know how a book is published. It's a bit magical. It's something I haven't experienced before. Let's learn about it. Draco said. Wow, you won't come up with something like a floating teleportation thing in the future, will you? Surprius blinked. Who knows? Once. So in the end I went to see this dueling club, just to watch the excitement, and if I don't go, it will be in vain. So at 8 o'clock in the evening, they moved from the lounge and returned to the auditorium. The long dining table disappeared, and a gilded stage appeared along one wall, with many candles burning in the sky, perhaps hundreds. The ceiling has also been rearranged, and is now as dark as velvet. It looks deep and distant, bringing a sense of mystery. A lot of people came to join in the fun, they were crowded and their faces were full of excitement. Do you think you can knock Lockhart down? In this atmosphere, Draco bumped Sepulus' shoulder and asked curiously. Probably not, he is still a professor after all. Serpilus coughed implicitly. I can't say for sure, after all, I haven't beaten him before, ha ha ha. Although it seems that it is not difficult to fight Lockhart. Surprius looked at the glittering stage and thought that Lockhart must come out to play 2 games in person for a while, so that he could see how good he was, and whether he would be knocked out directly and taken away, or drugged to make him unconscious. Better. Lockhart soon took to the stage amid the students' anticipation. He still looked radiant. Today he was wearing a purple-red robe, and his hair must have been carefully styled. He looked like he could be taken to a magazine shoot at any time. Behind him was Professor Snape, who walked onto the stage. He was still wearing his usual black clothes and looked expressionless. However, both Sepals and Draco, who were familiar with him, could see that Professor Snape was now impatient. Come around, can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? Lockhart waved to everyone with a smile on his face, looking very happy. Well, Principal Dumbledore is planning to open a dueling club, and this coincides with my idea, so I took the initiative to take over this task and fully train everyone in case you need to defend yourself one day. You need to use the same methods I have used countless times to protect yourself. When he said this, he playfully winked at the students in the audience. If you want to know more details about this, please see my published works. Surprius bit his back molar. Let me introduce my assistant, Professor Snape, Lockhart said, with a bigger smile on his face. He told me that he himself knew a thing or two about dueling, and he was generous. Do agreed to help me with a small demonstration before class. Lockhart faced everyone, still smiling playfully. I said, I don't want you little guys to worry. After I finish the demonstration, I will return your potions master to you intact. Sepulus choked and looked at Professor Snape behind Lockhart in horror as his lips curled up. How could he still laugh under such circumstances? Serpels didn't understand. If he saw Professor Snape looking at him with this expression and look, he would probably feel that his life was not long. Sepulus swallowed. Professor Snape, is he good at dueling? I rarely see my godfather do anything. Draco said sincerely that he didn't know. After all, the word that is often put together with godfather is magic potion. But suddenly he remembered something again. Looking at Lockhart on the stage, his expression was suddenly full of pity. I remembered that one year, the godfather was going to make a potion. It should be a very complicated potion, which requires dragon tears. I made a reservation with the dragon breeding farm in Australia early on. However, when it came time to add dragon tears to the potion, the breeding farm had not sent the tears over yet, and the answer given was that dragons refused to cry. Quote. Serpulus suddenly had some bad premonitions in his mind. Sure enough, Draco continued, with a somewhat apologetic tone, the godfather was very angry. He personally went to the breeding farm in Australia and beat the Welsh green dragon that was supposed to provide him with tears to tears. Back to England. Sepulus was stunned, although he does know that Professor Snape will be very strong. After all, without strong magic power as a support, magic potions cannot achieve the strongest effectiveness, but beating a dragon. This is too advanced. Never offend Professor Snape. Sepulus silently thought that he must not make a fool of himself in the process of making potions. He would recite thousands of potion theories when he got home. Professor Lockhart and Professor Snape on the stage had turned to face each other and bowed to each other. This is the basic etiquette for starting a duel. Lockhart indeed bowed and did many tricks with his hands. Professor Snape seemed even more impatient. He lowered his head casually and shook his shoulders as a salute. They held their wands to their chests. As you can see, we hold our wands in the normal dueling posture, Lockhart said to the quiet crowd. On the count of 3, we cast the first spell. Of course, none of us will take the other person's life. The arc on Professor Snape's lips seemed to be wider. 1, 2, 3. The two raised their wands above their shoulders at the same time. Professor Snape's spell was faster, and a dazzling red light flashed. Lockhart flew out of the stage, hit the wall, then slid down and curled up on the floor. Wow, a neat Expelliarmus, Sepulus said with emotion. Father is right, if a fight really breaks out, many people may not even be able to use an Expelliarmus, and can only stand still and take the beating. Quote. Draco nodded next to Serpels, looking deeply convinced. Lockhart staggered to his feet, his hat fell off, and his blonde hair now looked like he had drank a hair-erecting potion. As you can see, he said stiffly and staggered back onto the stage, a disarming spell. As you can see, I lost my wand. Yes, Professor Snape, it's a great idea to show them this move. However, if I say this, don't mind it. Your intention to do such a move just now is too obvious. If I want to stop you, I didn't put any effort into it. I just thought, in order to increase the students' knowledge, I might as well let them take a look. Surprise opened his mouth in surprise. Oh my God, how did he do it and say such things? You flew out, you had no power to resist at all, you were weak, pitiful and helpless, not as good as the little chick who was strangled to death by Ginny. How did you have the courage to say this? Maybe it's because for people like you, your face is more important than your life, and your mouth is more important than your life, right? Surprise looked away hesitantly, feeling that Lockhart might be beaten to death after a while. But Lockhart may also be afraid. He knew he couldn't beat him, and he also knew that he might make more fools of himself if he continued, so he cautiously held his wand and took 2 steps back, then cleared his throat. This is the end of the demonstration. Next, Professor Snape and I will select 2 representatives, and they will form pairs and practice with each other. Lockhart's eyes started to roll. Then said loudly, "Come Harry, come to me." Lockhart picked up Harry, who was still confused, and pulled him directly in front of him. The smile on Professor Snape's lips became even more obvious. He turned around and waved to Serpels. "Come here, Grindelwald, and let me see what kind of person you can mold the famous Potter into." Draco said, "Wow," with a narrow smile on his face, "Potter is going to suffer." Sepple smiled softly. "We are all classmates, just scare him." "Yes, scare him, I'm going to scare him into speaking Parseltongue." Harry looked very nervous, and he should be nervous. After all, he had not learned attack spells very systematically. The slightly offensive spells he had mastered now were probably prank spells that were more of a joke. Obviously, he also knew clearly that he could not ask Professor Snape for help, so he had no choice but to turn his attention to Professor Lockhart, trying to get some help through him. But what can Lockhart do for you? Serples looked at Harry's face, which was a little pale due to nervousness, and almost felt guilty in his heart. But he just smiled at Harry and held his wand tightly across his chest. It's just Expelliarmus, understand? Lockhart said loudly, Expelliarmus. He didn't finish his words because he was pushed aside by Professor Snape. Without Expelliarmus, Professor Snape's voice was cold. Grindelwald, you should let those unruly children know the consequences. Sepulus put his chin back and nodded. Harry looked even more nervous. Grinning. The price for being too nervous was that Harry had already fired his curse before Professor Snape's word, one, could be heard. He probably regretted it at that time, and his face looked even worse. And Serples rolled on the spot the moment his wand shook, and the wand moved in an arc along the raised wrist. Quick confinement. Harry failed to escape. He was trapped by the red thorn-like magic coil. He staggered back 2 steps, but did not fall. Instead, he tried hard to raise his hand and fired another magic spell. The flames are raging. His hands were tied, so the angle at which the spell was launched was not very good, and the magic power output might not be very accurate either. When the flames fell on the stands, they were very big and puffy. Sepulus heard Lockhart scream. But why are you screaming? Sepulus felt that he had really grown up. He was actually able to calmly raise his wand in the face of such flames that the hot air in front of him was distorted. Fire Ash Snake. Sepulus raised his hand and chose a summoning spell. The little snakes, which are usually found in the ashes of the fireplace, were not worried about the flames in front of them. Instead, they were bathed in the flames and rushed towards Harry even more excitedly. Some of them rushed in different directions. His eyes were focused on the students in the stands. Weather spell. Surprius turned his wrist, no longer intending to control the snakes, but raised his hand to summon a rain cloud and began to extinguish the fire. The snake wouldn't bite him anyway, but it would attack Harry or others. Harry couldn't use magic in his desperation, so he would definitely ask the snake to stop. Crisis awareness. Oh, thinking of this, Sepulus also turned his wrist to cancel the effect of quick confinement. Don't be too critical. If the crisis gets serious, Professor Snape may save people. As expected, Harry took 2 steps back nervously. Don't come over here, he said. Sepulus was surprised to hear that Harry's first words were Parseltongue. He looked at Harry's face in surprise, thinking that Harry might not realize that he was speaking Parseltongue. But he himself realized that it didn't matter whether he was aware of it or not. He talked to the snake in front of all the students, and that was enough. Serples took a few steps back slightly and raised his wand. He didn't want to make the matter too serious and let people know that Harry could speak Parseltongue and make people think that Harry might be Salazar Slytherin. For posterity, maybe it's just the secret room he opened. There's no need for the ash snake to really hurt anyone. Harry suddenly took a step forward. He actually spoke to a snake facing the students, telling the snake to stay away from the students. At this, Sepulus's eyes widened. He was not pretending to be surprised, he was really surprised. What are you doing? Are you adding to the drama yourself? This is another price. The ash snake is a creature that is not very intelligent. It just heard Harry's voice and was a little confused. It straightened up and turned its head. In front of the snake was Justin Finch-Fletchley, the Muggle-born boy who had had a pleasant conversation with Serples. We can stop here. Serples told himself that although he felt that driving the snake to attack Finn really at this time would make others think that Harry had no good intentions, forget it. Sepulus cancelled the weather spell and pointed the tip of the wand at the ash snake on the ground. The spell will stop. The ash snake disappeared before Justin Finch-Fletchley's eyes. Surprise even appropriately sent off the relationship with tension and worry. Are you okay, Justin? Justin shook his head, his shoulders straightened. He looked past Sepulus and looked at Harry, with a look of fear, disgust and shock on his face. I'm fine, Sepulus. Less. There was silence all around. No one spoke loudly, only low, whispering voices, and Harry looked confused. He took a few steps forward in confusion, while the students in the audience backed away in horror. What's wrong? Harry asked confused. Sepulus turned his gaze to Professor Snape, who was looking at Harry with a strange, seemingly worried look. "That's it," said Mr. Snape. "Disband." Sepulus licked his lips at Harry, and then jumped off the dual platform. Draco grabbed Sepulus's wrist. He looked in Harry's direction as if he was facing an enemy. "Be safe." Sepulus tilted his head. "What's wrong?" "Chamber of Secrets," Draco said briefly. "But the Potter family is a pretty famous family, right?" Serpils blinked. "Then who can tell me clearly? Genealogy is always like this. There are always some things that cannot be written down and shown to others." Draco snorted. "What if?" Their voices were not quiet. Although everyone had just attracted attention because of Harry's snake language, Sepulus, who summoned snakes, also attracted a lot of attention. What he and Draco said quickly be heard and spread. So when Surprise went to the auditorium for lunch the next day, Blaise told everyone that almost everyone was now rumoring that Potter was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. "Isn't anyone going to tell me about it?" Sepulus said half-jokingly. "I summoned the snake first, and I also raised snakes, and I'm still a Slytherin." "You didn't talk to the snake," Blaise waved his hand, "and you grew up in the Muggle world, and you were friends with Finley, and have a good relationship with everyone, even if you were really a Slytherin. Descendants, you won't be the one to eliminate Muggles, it's definitely not you." Sepulus laughed. "That's right. This is really great." Harry Potter was sullen over the recent rumors going around the school. Almost no one is willing to believe him. Maybe even some people in Gryffindor think that Harry may really have the blood of Salazar Slytherin. Otherwise, how can we explain that he was not killed by the mysterious man? He was just a baby at that time. How could the mysterious man be defeated by him? He must have a super strong black magic bloodline. The mysterious man was worried that another terrible devil would appear to confront him, so he insisted on killing him. Once the seeds of doubt took root, they sprouted quickly, leaving Harry Potter unable to defend himself. Serpils felt sorry for Harry in his heart, because Serpils knew that Harry was really innocent. "I think," Serpils said, lying on the bed and looking at the curtains above his head, "doing what you think is right is no longer convincing to me." Tom was sitting on the sofa reading a book. Since he had the entity, his desire for knowledge was exactly the same as that of Serpils. He couldn't use magic for knowledge. Riddle's explanation for this was that Tom was created from the blood of Serpils, and Sepulus's abilities are not enough, so Tom is born with a defect, he can be regarded as a squib. This was something that both Sepils and Tom regretted. But Tom understood. After all, he couldn't force more. He was originally just a diary, but later he actually had his own consciousness, and now he has an entity. Even if he can't cast magic, he can still endure it. "Are you still upset about setting up Harry?" Tom put down the book in his hand and went to sit down beside Surpria's bed. "You look sad." "It's hard not to be sad at all," Serpils sighed, reaching out to grab Tom's hand. "I may need a new spiritual support." "That makes sense," Tom nodded. "The slogan of the first-generation Dark Lord, your father, is, for the greater good, and the second-generation Dark Lord, the crazy guy's slogan is, magic is might, and loudly promote the theory of pure blood superiority, you should have won. It sounds like you've put me in the position of the third-generation Dark Lord." Sepulus held Tom's hand. "I think my original dream has never changed. I just want to have AI have a home, a stable job, and a beautiful wife. It seems that my wife is not very good now. I don't seem to have any relationships with the opposite gender, but all with the same." Tom blinked. "Don't belittle yourself. Who knows? What if some good girl blindly falls in love with me in the future? Although I think this probability is unlikely, there is a high probability that I will have a same lover, and the child will depend on the fertility potion. God, that thing is not cheap." Sepulus sighed again. "Then why don't you change your father's slogan?" Tom thought for a while and gave Sepulus some advice. "Tell me about it." Surprise leaned a little and looked at Tom. "For a better future," Tom said softly. "Isn't it a bit too broad?" Sepulus murmured this sentence again, and then smiled. "No, I think it's good. For a better future, this is what I am willing to work hard for, and what I have done. Everything is for the future, which is good and a good slogan." He looked relieved, and his mental state improved almost instantly. He held Tom's hand and smiled. "I can sleep well tonight." Tom raised his hand, landed on the bruises under Serpil's eyes, and sighed deeply. "If you still can't sleep well, you should go to Germany to find Wolf. You will obviously feel more at ease by his side. I feel a lot more at ease when I'm with Professor Snape. Seppulus said harshly. Then go sleep next to your professor, do you dare? Tom made a very appropriate mockery. Seppulus closed his eyes and pretended to be dead. What? What did you say? I can't hear you. Tom laughed and went back to the sofa to continue reading. Sir Prius had a peaceful night's sleep. Cherish the time of peace and tranquility, because you will never be peaceful for long. Riddle said that he would deal with Ghost Nick, and also said that he would make arrangements for the subsequent framing of Harry Potter. I thought you would also be very dissatisfied with Harry, something like that. Serples once had this conversation with Riddle, an old enemy or something, resentful that he once made you fail. Quote. Correct your wording, honey, Riddle retorted patiently, being defeated by Harry, the so-called old enemy and falling short are all aimed at the other Riddle and have nothing to do with me. I am at most interested in Harry Potter. I'm a little curious about how he did it, but nothing else. He smiled and looked at Seppulus with crooked eyebrows. I'm not as interested in him as I am in you. Seppulus, thank you, but don't be interested in me. When the accident happened again, it was during the astronomy class on Thursday night. Serples was wrapped in Durmstrang's fur cloak and holding up a telescope to draw a star map. Seriously, Durmstrang's cloak was real. Awesome, super warm. Drawing a star map is a very boring process. Some things in the wizarding world are very advanced, and some things are a bit backward. It's like the star map really has to be searched one by one with a hand-cranked telescope, and then drawn on parchment. Superior. Sepples was convinced that he had seen an advanced telescope in a newspaper in the Muggle world, which had an automatic star-finding function, so there was no need to look for it yourself. However, all magic in the Hogwarts area is invalid, so it cannot be used at all. Serples, who was bored and fighting with every twinkling star in the sky, was a little drowsy, but a sharp cry suddenly frightened Serples. Let's do it! Let's do it! Let's do it again! No matter humans or ghosts, we are not immune. The pen under his hand drew a long line with a flick of his hand, and the star map in his hand was considered useless. Professor Sinistra looked a little frightened and asked his classmates to follow him downstairs to see what was going on. After all, he is still a teacher. If he brings his students with him, he can still look after him if anything happens. Hogwarts is not safe now. Who knows what is in the secret room and whether it will bypass him and attack him, student. There were many teachers who had the same idea as him. There were many students taking evening classes at this time, and soon the corridor was full of footsteps and chatter. Surprise saw Nick first. The almost headless Nick was no longer milky white and transparent. He was covered in black and smoky, motionless and suspended high above the ground, with his head tilted and a look of horror on his face. Blaise exclaimed, Merlin's wardrobe door. Immediately afterwards, Surprise saw Justin Finch Fletchley. He fell to the ground, his stiff body fell into the water, and a look of horror froze on his face. And Harry Potter stood in the corridor, with a confused look on his face. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.